All right, 5 minutes to go. If anyone can hear me, please raise your hand here on the webinar so I can make sure you guys are hearing me and can see the screen. You can also comment on the questions and let me know. All right, we're starting in 5 minutes. Okay, great. 5 minutes. Bye-bye for now. Talk to you in 5. Four minutes to start. Okay, I guess it's 3 minutes now. Guys, I see you are already, the crowd is accumulating and we're getting more and more people into the webinar. So thank you for attending. I see you're all also asking some questions here. So please, if you have any question, you can start and ask them on the question bar on the right. We will have Q&A session, so Scott can answer all of your questions and answers. I'm sure most of your questions will be answered during webinar special training today. So thank you again, and we're gonna start in 3 minutes. We're starting in 1 minute. All right, everyone, good evening. I'm here. My name is Ori Fairuz, and I'm here today with a special guest, Scott Laterno, and we are going to talk today about company formation and tax compliance for the Amazon sellers. My story starts with Scott in about 1 year ago, I guess, when I wanted to start and to form my own company. And guys, can you hear me, by the way? If you can hear me, please raise your hand here so I just can make sure that everyone can hear me. All right, thank you, everyone. I can see that all of you are raising your hand. Thank you so much. And okay, great. Okay, so my story with Scott starting like 1 year ago, when I wanted to form up another company of my own. I've got several U.S. companies in the U.S. and every time I wanted to form up a company in the U.S., I was needed to go through the tedious flying to the U.S. and go to the bank branch and opening the bank account. I know there are many companies who's like offering company formation from the internet. You just go there and like paying I don't know what amount, and they're doing that for you. The problem starts when you need to set up your own bank account. Then you need to be there. You need to be in the United States in order to do that. And here's come the problem. You know, I was needed to fly every time to the U.S. It's like 24 hours flight if you are living in Israel and back, just to do that. No mention about the hotels and you know, when they're like paying for your staying there. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that anymore, and I was looking for solutions how to do it when we are here in Israel. And Scott was my answer to this to this problem. You know, actually, I was looking for a solution, and I found Scott. To be honest, I'm not really remember how I found Scott, but I thank God I found him. He was tell me that there is other way, that you can go to Tel Aviv. There is a Citibank branch there, and you can do that. You can do it from Israel. You just need to go like half an hour. I'm living in Ashdod, if you don't know that, and you can form up your own bank account and company here from Israel without even needed to go to the U.S. And that was like wow for me. Whew, I was stupid to doing that all the time. Every time I needed to form up a new company, and it was like a big relief. And in addition, what we're going to cover today, I don't know how many of you were attend in the webinar with Eldad last week. Eldad was covering all the U.S. taxes in the federal level. And here today, Scott will put some more training and will put more light on the sales tax on Amazon on the state level. I hope I'm not messing some stuff. You know, if I am, Scott will fix me. You know, will correct me. But Scott have a great knowledge when it comes to Amazon seller. He know everything around the e-commerce world and around Amazon. He's specialized in everything that related to taxes. And we had plenty of questions that wasn't answered regarding taxes. Do I need to pay taxes? How much it costs to form up a company? And many questions regarding taxes. And Scott will cover it all today in this webinar. And he will give time for questions and answers. And we are going to get some of you on this call to ask Scott whatever questions you have. And hopefully Scott will not be overwhelmed and can, answer your question. So without any more, talking, I am glad, I'm thrilled to meet you, Scott, today. Scott, are you there?
Thanks, Ori. I'm here, and shalom, everyone. Hope everybody's having an outstanding evening or day, depending on what part of the world you're in. Can you hear me okay, Ori?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Guys, if you can hear Scott, please, please, please raise your hand again, just to let me know that you can hear Scott. All right, perfect, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ori. I appreciate the introduction, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with your members of your So Simple Academy and all the great work you're doing to help Amazon sellers simplify the process to be profitable in their business and be successful. And as you mentioned, you know, we met probably about a year and a half ago and communicated and worked through a process. And I really have to say, you know, I am selective of who I choose to work with. And I want to say to everybody, you already know that Ori has a passion for wanting to help his members to get them the best information, to get them the best pricing, save the most money, and make sure things are done right. So it's really a pleasure to work with you, Ori, and I'm excited to share this special training that some of it's been developed over 19 years that I've been in business, and a lot of it specifically for Amazon over the last 2 years. So we're going to go through a step-by-step process for you this evening so you are very clear and understand what needs to happen. And as Ori mentioned, I'm more than happy to stay as long as you need to answer your questions because there is a lot of misinformation on this subject. I'm going to share with you some of my global resources and who I work with so you can understand where a lot of my research and information comes from. So with that, thanks again, Ori. It's a pleasure. And let's go ahead and get started with the training. Hopefully you have either a notebook or maybe a 2-computer screen that you can type some notes that apply to your situation. Feel free to type in questions as we go along. I will wait to the end to address them all, but feel free if it pops in your mind to type them. And then we'll kind of sort through those at the end. And as Ori mentioned, we'll do some live calls if that's helpful for any of you also. So today we're going to present and talk about business formation in the U.S. and we're also going to talk about sales tax compliance for Amazon U.S. sellers, and we're going to talk about some of the misconceptions, the belief systems about that. I'm going to share with you the latest research and information on both of those so you can move forward in your business. So the key today is we want to help you move forward, but we also want to avoid this approach because this is a very expensive approach. A lot of people approach this with their head in the sand, which is a metaphor that they see other people doing certain things, so they just assume I can skip sales tax or not do it this way. I'm going to teach you the right way to do it here. Some of you may or may not be on track, but I'm going to share with you how to get back on track. And my gift to you today is going to be 2 C's. And the 2 C's are, I want to give you clarity, because I know some of you may have spent a lot of time on other websites, forums, blogs, reading tons of information on this. I would like to give you clarity and confidence today so you can move forward and really focus on your Amazon business and the marketing strategies you're learning from Ori and the profitability of your business, so at the end of the day you have more choices in your life. So that's my goal for you today. And what you're going to learn specifically, we're going to talk about business structures in the U.S. as an international seller. I know there may be a few folks that are in the U.S., but primarily we're going to talk about if you're outside the U.S., specifically what are the options as far as different types of entities, what state should you do, should it be Wyoming, should it be Nevada, Delaware, what type of entity would make the most sense. So I'm going to give you the most current information in that. And then we're going to talk about sales tax nexus. What does that mean? What creates sales tax nexus? Which means a nexus means a business presence in different states. So for example, if you opened up a office in the U.S. and you had offices in 4 different states, that office would create a business presence, and the word used is nexus in the United States, which means business presence. We're going to talk about how do you get into compliance with Amazon, how do you register for sales tax permits to be able to collect and remit sales tax, what are some mistakes to avoid, and we're going to talk about sales tax compliance, and I'm going to simplify it for you because it's a cost of doing business. It can be very easy and simple, and I'm just going to give you the best resource to make it easy for you. So again, I just want to point out that here's what the research says, here's why it's required, here's how you simplify it so you move forward in your business, because I'm going to tell you that a lot of your competitors may go out of business in the next 2 to 3 years because there's a lot of scrutiny happening between the states and looking at Amazon sellers who are not in compliance with sales tax. And the good news is you're going to get the right information today so you can move forward, be in compliance from a business point of view so you can build your brand in the United States and be really successful and profitable. And a little bit, just for a couple minutes, about my background and why Ori invited myself. I founded my main company, NCP, in 1997, so we're in our 19th year of business. And sales tax system is a service and a product we developed in early 2015 for the Amazon market. And how that was developed, I had a big marketing group approach me, and they wanted me to put together a easy process for folks to understand sales tax and get into compliance so they can focus on their business. And I'll share more about that towards the end. We have thousands of clients throughout the U.S. and internationally that we have helped form in the U.S. is our market that we work with. We work with the best of the best when it comes to taxes, income, sales tax, legal, funding, immigration, credit, asset protection, estate planning. I'll show you in a minute a screenshot of all the folks that we're partnered with, and I think you'll find that that adds a lot of credibility to what we're doing and who we work with very closely. My personal background as the CEO and founder of the company is I have a business finance degree when I graduated from the university many, many years ago, back in 1989. I'll do the math for you. I'm actually going to be 50 in a couple weeks, so I've been in this industry for almost 25 years, and I love to do research. I love to ask questions, and I like to say I have a PhD in results. In other words, my goal is to get you results. We work with some of the best attorneys, best accountants, and I challenge them consistently by asking more difficult questions, and I ask why a lot, because our goal is to give our members the best information. I like to take very complex information and simplify it for you. I know obviously Ori does the same thing for you to help you be successful. I'm also known as the business formation expert. For example, yesterday I had a phone call with an international client who speaks all around the world, and they were raising money for new technology, and they're getting partnerships with Fortune 500 companies, and the person they called first to structure multiple things and do a consultation with myself is they wanted to go to me first, and then I gave them a couple of resources to raise money, securities attorneys, and I moved them to the next step in the process. So I get those kind of calls on a weekly basis. Most of my team runs our business at NCP. I do the higher end strategy sessions. I have a certain consulting fee for those. Then, of course, I do the training on the front end, as I am with you today, which is one of my favorite things to do, is help train folks so you can get the right information. So at the end of the day, our goal is to help you launch and grow your business with confidence. My belief is that if you have a solid foundation and you do it properly and you have confidence that you've done that properly, that confidence is a positive ripple effect in every other part of your business, meaning When you have confidence, now you move to the marketing that Ori teaches you, and you move through everything else that you learn. You're going to implement better because you know you did it the right way. You have confidence. You're not overwhelmed. You're not wondering if you skipped a couple steps and if you're going to get audited 3 to 5 years from now, what that's going to mean to you. So it's really, really important that we help you move forward in a positive fashion. These are just a few of our strategic partners globally that we work with. You may recognize some of the names. Avalar and Meridian are 2 Amazon global partners. World First is a company that exchanges money around the world. TaxJar and Taxify in the sales tax niche. You'll see a couple of VAT firms in Europe, and I've done webinars with these firms. I consult with them. Catching Clouds, I've done a training with them about e-commerce accounting in the United States, and a couple different law firms and tax firms. So this is just a handful of the companies that I work with very closely. We get referrals from. I actually get referrals from Amazon in India directly, where they want their Indian sellers to set up U.S. accounts. You probably know that Amazon opened in India in September, and so it's quite amazing that there's still big companies in India that are not selling on Amazon in the U.S. are just starting to make that transition. So there's really a lot of opportunity. So I'm very blessed and fortunate to be involved in a lot of those conversations. So let's start today with the foundation, which is your business structure strategies in the U.S. And again, as I mentioned, I believe in having a complete foundation for your business. And let me share some of the factors that you want to consider when you form a U.S. company. Of course, you are interested in taxes, right? That should be a factor. You want to pay the lowest amount in taxes. As Ori mentioned, last week you had a webinar with Eldad. Eldad is a CPA here in the U.S. that has clients in Israel and the U.S., and he will help with the U.S. tax treaties, the strategy between Israel and the U.S., and how to minimize taxes. So taxes is very important, of course. Liability is important. I'm going to share with you a very important court case about product liability in the U.S. You probably know that there's lots of lawsuits in the U.S. We're a very litigious society, which means people have a tendency to sue people fairly often in the U.S. My goal, again, is for you to be protected as you sell products on Amazon, or if you happen to sell them on any other platforms. So we're going to talk about liability. Audit risk, of course, if you do a U.S. company, you want to minimize your chance of audit. And there's different schedules in the U.S. versus, if you're individually selling or if you're a company. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And, of course, when you form a U.S. company in the U.S. and you're selling to the U.S. market, you develop a different level of a brand and a marketing message about you're a very successful international seller. You have a U.S. company, so that adds to the equation, which could add to more sales and results. Of course, you have to take into your situation, most of you are probably running your Amazon business either by yourself or with your spouse or life partner. Some of you may have outside partners, so that's a factor that comes into play when we form a U.S. entity. So let's look a little bit at some of the structure options you may have heard of. And you could set up a U.S. sole proprietorship or do business in your own name. Some of you may be selling on Amazon in your own name. You may have set up your Amazon Seller Central account doing it that way. Some people do what's called a DBA, doing business as, where they pick kind of a name that's not incorporated or a separate legal entity. That also falls into the same category as a sole proprietorship. So it's a simple place to start. A lot of international sellers do this. I've worked with some of the other big marketing groups, and this is typically what they recommend to kind of test the waters, to get things up and running, or to get your first product and do a couple sales so you get the confidence that things are working. But as you start moving forward, you'll realize you may want to upgrade, because the biggest challenge is you have unlimited liability as a U.S. sole proprietorship or doing business in your own name. Now, some of you may have a company in Israel, a separate legal entity, that would provide you liability protection also. That's a separate subject we'll cover in a few minutes. Most of you are going to look at, when you form a U.S. company, probably forming either a corporation or what's called an LLC. LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. So that's going to be probably the two most common options for everybody. And that's going to be something that we'll address in more detail here in a moment. Now, of course, when you form a separate legal entity, you have what's called liability, meaning the company could get sued in the U.S., but generally you will be protected as either the officer or manager or as the owner of the company, which is really important, right? Typically, a corporation or LLC usually will pay a little bit lower in taxes. It depends how it's structured, but typically that is another benefit. And better branding, what I mean by better branding is typically, as I just mentioned, if you're starting off a business, a lot of people start as a sole proprietorship, which they do it in their own name because that's simple. It's an easy way to start. But as you become more successful, everybody who, for the most part, is more successful and selling more on a monthly basis and growing their business, they're going to realize that they should form a corporation or LLC. So when you're doing business with a company, and I know it has a Inc. or an LLC at the end of it, I know they're not just a startup company or they believe they're going to be successful or they're doing things properly. So that's what I mean about better branding when it comes to an entity. Let's talk for a minute about product liability. This isn't the best image. It's stretched a little bit, but if you're importing products from China, you do have to be concerned about liability. And even if you're importing products from India, I've talked to some sellers from different countries around the world, product liability in the United States is very, very important. And so let me give you an example of a case that was shared by a very famous attorney in Florida who's a friend of mine years ago. There was a woman in Florida who was retired, and she was worth $5 million. And she wanted to, as a hobby, she liked to make doll clothing. And so what she wanted to do was, in the U.S., they have things called like a flea market or a market where you could go rent a space and you could bring things to sell on the weekends. And so she imported these dolls from China, and she would decorate them and make the clothing, and she would sell them. Her goal wasn't really to make a lot of money. It was more of a passion she had. She already was worth $5 million, but it's what she wanted to do. Now, my attorney friend advised her that even though your goal is not to make much money, you should probably form a corporation for liability purposes. And her response was, which is a common response, is I'm just selling dolls and I'm making the clothes. How much liability could there really be? Why do I need to spend the money to form a corporation? And he said, well, you're worth $5 million. If something goes wrong, you want to be protected. She says, you know what? I don't think it's necessary. I'll just do business my own name. What happened was, one of the dolls she sold to a 5-year-old little girl. She was playing with the doll, and I have 3 girls, and they take doll clothes off, and they change them with other clothes. And when she was changing the clothes, and she was pulling on the doll, playing with it, one of the arms came off the doll, and underneath the arm was this bendable spike. And when she was playing with the doll, the spike accidentally got caught in her eye, and she became blinded in one eye. And she sued the lady, who was this wealthy woman, for $5 million for product liability because their daughter became blinded by this defective doll. Long story short, this woman in Florida lost her entire net worth of $5 million because she was selling a doll, and she didn't think she'd have any liability. What could possibly go wrong? So there's hundreds of cases like this where if you're selling products, hey, it's good news, nothing wrong with it. You want to have a separate legal entity is the benefit that can reduce liability individually. Now, I will tell you, if she had a separate legal entity and she did business that way, they would have gone after the separate legal entity, but her $5 million that was personally owned by her would be separate. We're going to talk about states and protecting what's called the entity veil in a minute. So very, very important to just be aware of. Now, your solution, of course, is you want to separate what's called your business and personal assets, meaning whatever type of personal assets you own, whatever type of money you have personally, as you grow your Amazon business, probably a couple of your goals maybe to develop more assets individually, probably to increase your lifestyle, to take more holidays, and maybe to pay down some debt and accelerate some of your retirement. So you want to separate your business and personal assets. So the way you do that is you form what's called a separate legal entity. Again, in the United States, you have what's called an LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Company, or a corporation. Again, the benefits include liability protection, lower taxes, and better branding. But there's 3 keys to optimize your results, and I want you to pay really close attention to the next couple pages. Again, I've done 19 years of research on this. I used to go to Deloitte & Touche, and I would pay them $600 an hour to go through strategy. I'd hire different law firms. So I've paid over 19 years probably at least $250,000 to, if not $500,000 in professional fees to bring this research and simplify it to you. So and this is where it's coming from. So here's the 3 keys for you. The 3 keys is when you form a U.S. company, you have to look at which state is best for your Amazon business. It looks like we've maxed out in attendees, so that's why the item still keeps popping up. So let's don't show again. That'd be the proper one. So I got that now.
Okay.
Yeah, we're full, so that's good news. So everybody made it who's here. That's good. Thanks, Ori. So which state is very, very important. We're going to talk about that. We actually talk about which entity a little bit more detail. And we also have to look at what's called a complete formation. That's really, really important. Most people don't know about number 3. And I'm going to tell you, some of you may be susceptible. Some of you may have already set up a U.S. entity, but you didn't do it properly. The good news is I'm going to give you a complete checklist. You can take a screenshot, take your phone out, take a picture of the screen, do a print screen, take notes. But then you can calibrate if you've already set up an entity if you did it properly. Or, of course, if you're going to be setting up an entity, then it's easy because you'll know all the steps and what you have to do. So let's transition to that. Let's talk about which state is best. And now, some of you may be in the U.S. I know most of you are outside the U.S. If there happens to be a couple folks on the training from the U.S., if somebody lived, for example, in California and they're selling on Amazon, they're typically going to form a California corporation or LLC because that's where they live. Now, for everybody else, if you're outside the United States, you have a choice. You're not going to pick California if you live in Israel because California is very high taxed. New York is very high taxed. So you're going to either look at typically Wyoming, Delaware, or Nevada. So let's look at each one. Now, Wyoming, you will hear things online, and this is a true statement, that they do have lower fees than Nevada. So their state filing fees are $100 versus $425 in Nevada. And by the way, our company, even though our name is Nevada Corporate Planners, we incorporate in all 50 states. So whether you want to form something in Wyoming, Delaware, Florida, Nevada, we can do it in all 50 states. So I want to point out that, yes, Wyoming does have lower fees by $325. Now, you will hear folks talk about that in Wyoming, there's a little bit more privacy, meaning if you form, for example, an LLC, a limited liability company, that the manager's name, which would be your name typically, does not show up in state records. What that means is when you file articles for an LLC, it's typically a one-page form that's filed with the Secretary of State in the U.S. Most states you have to list the name of the LLC, the manager, the address of the manager, and who's what's called the registered agent, and usually have an organizer. In the state of Wyoming, the manager's name doesn't have to be listed. So you will hear folks in different, I should say, e-commerce groups or Amazon groups talk about do Wyoming because you have privacy. Now, the key is really to understand privacy from what? This is where I like to provide very specific distinctions so you are very crystal clear on what the benefit is and what is what I'd call the exaggerated benefit. So the question is there privacy from liability? And the answer is no. What that means is some people will say, well, if my name's not in state records, how can somebody sue me? Well, that's a good point, that somebody won't be able to name you probably because your name's not in state records. But we got to take a step backwards and say, what really happens? If you are selling on Amazon in the U.S., and let's say you form a U.S. company, and you update your Amazon Seller Central account in the name of that new entity, and now you're selling on Amazon. If I go to Amazon and buy products, which I do all the time, I love buying on Amazon, is I might look at the name of your company, right? I might see this is by, you know, First Place Products, right, LLC. And if I have a problem with your products, I honestly don't really care who the owner is. I just want to know who did I buy it from, because if I had to sue someone, the lawsuit's going to be named at that company. So they're going to sue your LLC or corporation. So what's important to know is when you have what's called a registered agent, which is the contact point in the U.S. if you're ever sued, they have to accept service of process, which means the lawsuit on your behalf, and they forward it on to you, and you got to defend it. So it's a mistake when people say, if my name doesn't show up in state records on a Wyoming LLC, that means I have privacy from liability. That's not a true statement. Now, what is a true statement is from a marketing level. I know from talking to hundreds of Amazon sellers, sometimes I've been at several big Amazon events. I went to this event in Utah called the Prosper Show a couple months ago. There were sellers from around the world, and what happened was, I talked to sellers that had over 15,000 SKUs. I mean, amazing big-time sellers. And so I'm very familiar with this, and so I realize that marketers don't want to give away their strategies to get reviews, and how do they get people just to give feedback and when they're not happy, but only give positive reviews. And I've had some people disclose to me privately how they do it, and I don't sell on Amazon, by the way, so I think they feel comfortable sharing that information. But I know from a marketing point of view, you want to kind of protect your marketing ideas and strategies and things of that nature. I mean, to me, it's quite simple. If I was going to go on Amazon, I found a product that had 4,000 reviews, they're probably doing something right from a marketing point of view. I'd probably buy their product and attempt to reverse engineer what they're doing. But anyways, that's kind of a different subject. So the marketers do like the fact that sometimes if they form a U.S. company, if their name's not behind it, and maybe nobody can figure out this stuff. At the end of the day, it may not be that big of a benefit, but that's what people talk about. So now, again, let me talk about those who live in the United States. Let's go back to my California example just for a minute so you understand the distinction. Even though if most of you are outside the U.S., you might talk to somebody in the U.S. You might come to an Amazon event in the U.S. And let's say somebody in California, if they form a Wyoming company and they live in California, they need to do what's called foreign register into the state of California because that's where they live and do business. Therefore, once they do that, the privacy goes out the window from a marketing point of view, because once you get into California, you're going to have to put your name all over the place. So what I was just sharing as a strategy, when I say Wyoming, you don't have to put your name in state records, that really applies only to those of you, which is 98% of you outside the U.S. If you spoke to somebody in the U.S. and they lived in New York or they lived in Texas and they said, I'm going to form a Wyoming LLC for privacy, even though they think it applies to them, because they have to foreign register, it really, they don't get the advantages. Now, I will tell you, I've talked to dozens and dozens of people in the U.S. who are not doing this properly also. So don't be surprised if you get a different answer from that. So I hope that makes sense. And let's move on to the next state. Ori, I'm just going to check in for a minute. How's the pacing and timing? Am I going at a pretty good pace for everybody?
Yeah, we have time. No problem with the time, and I think we're good.
Okay, good. So I just want to check in. I can go much faster, but because the language, I want to kind of go at a slower pace and make sure we emphasize each of these points. So I appreciate everybody's patience. I hope that's the preference. And I appreciate the nice comments, tons of good value. So I appreciate it. So I prefer to go a little bit slower if that's okay, so we can just point out each distinction along the way. So
perfect.
Hopefully that worked out good for everybody. So let's continue on here. So let's talk about good old Nevada. Now, it's my home state where I'm based out of. Now, there's more liability protection overall in the state of Nevada, and what that refers to is something called protecting the entity veil. So what that means is when you form a corporation or LLC and you're the manager or a director, if you're a corporation, you generally are protected from liability. So generally protected. So if somebody does sue your company and you get named in the lawsuit, if you're a manager or director, generally you're protected. Each state has slightly different rules and cases. Nevada has the most difficult standard to go after somebody individually as a manager or director. What means is you have to prove outright fraud in Nevada. In other words, even if you didn't run the company properly, you didn't do all the steps, Nevada really protects the entity veil. In other words, it protects the entity veil if somebody was going to set aside the company and go after you individually, and it also protects you as an individual if you're the manager or director. And Nevada, because of the casino industry and businesses, there's billion-dollar businesses. Tesla, you probably know, just opened up a big plant here this last year. And so some people don't know Microsoft has a company here. There's lots of companies in Nevada because of the liability protection. Now, we'll talk about taxes in a moment. Now, again, same thing applies to Nevada. If you live in California and you form a Nevada company, you're going to have to foreign qualify into California. And there still is some of the liability advantages come into play. Some people will talk about tax savings in Nevada, which I'll talk about in a moment. So I just want to, again, distinguish if you live in the U.S. versus outside the U.S. Now, some of you probably know that last year, Nevada added what's called a commerce tax. If you do more than $4 million in sales to Nevada residents, not the entire U.S., not the entire world, but in the state of Nevada. If you do $4 million or more in the state of Nevada, then there's a tax that comes into play. And I'm sure for most of you, you would love to have the problem of doing $4 million or more in sales in Nevada. Some of you might do $1 million all in sales, and you might only be doing $60,000 in Nevada. So probably 99% of you, this commerce tax isn't going to come into play. It was designed for the big companies like Walmart and Amazon, who has a facility here, and the big box stores that do millions and millions in sales. And really why they added the tax was to help our schools in the state of Nevada. We have a lot of good things here, but there's so much population has been moving here, the schools are way behind in building more schools. So that's one of the major they added this last year for bigger businesses. So for 99% of you, Nevada basically, if you're outside the U.S., is going to be there's going to be no state taxes. Of course, federal taxes is a whole different subject, which we'll comment about in a minute. Now, Nevada is much faster to file because when we file a Nevada LLC or corporation, we do it online through our trust account, and it's filed literally within about 24 hours. Once we get your information, we clarify what type of entity you want to be. So it's much faster to do. If we do Wyoming, Wyoming is very different pace. They need what's called an original signature from you. So we have to the articles to you. You have to mail them back to us, and we mail them in the state. That's going to be like 15 to 20 business days to get Wyoming. So sometimes speed comes into play. Now, Delaware is a very popular state. Of course, it's on the East Coast, and It's very well known for Fortune 500 companies go to Delaware. Delaware does have some state taxes based upon income in that state. And usually it comes into play when somebody's going to raise capital. Like, remember the clients I mentioned a few minutes ago that were in the technology business or were looking to raise money. I referred them to an East Coast attorney that uses Delaware corporations to raise capital, just like Facebook and all the big companies, they go to Delaware. It's because Delaware has better rights for minority shareholders. It's more well known, and 99% of you are not going to be raising capital, so Delaware is probably not going to be the state you're going to want to choose. It does have some state tax rates that could come into play, so it's not a bad state. You're probably going to mostly lean towards Nevada or Wyoming. If for the $325 more for Nevada, in the big scheme of things, you may say that, hey, for $325, that's worth the extra layer of protection, and it gets done a little bit faster. If budget's kind of tight for you financially, you want to save a few bucks, you might be looking at Wyoming as a possibility. So now let's take a look and transition. Remember, feel free to post all your questions. I'll address them at the end. My goal is to give you a detailed overview. Then we'll get into individual nuances. And keep in mind, of course, if we'll keep your name private. So if you set up something that didn't do it properly, we're not going to use your name. So that'll be. So let's talk about which entity you may want to consider. Again, Eldad probably went through some of this. I saw his diagrams between an Israeli company and a U.S. company. A lot of it he talked about as having a U.S. corporation. It's usually used to retain profits. A C Corp is what you'll hear is most common. Some people, if they want profits to flow through, they'll do an S corporation. If you're outside the U.S., you're not going to be able to do what's called an S corporation. There's restrictions on who the shareholders can be. There's specific rules for it. But if you happen to live in the U.S., an S corporation could be a possibility. That's where the profits flow through to you as the owners. Then you also have what I mentioned, of course, is a limited liability company or an LLC. The key thing you want to understand about an LLC, and so many people don't understand this even in the U.S., even accounting firms don't always understand this, is that an LLC can be taxed in there's four different options for taxation. So a lot of people say, they'll call us and say, I want to form an LLC, and I'll say, how would you like it taxed? And then usually that's met with a long pause because they have no idea. And they'll be saying, well, it's just me. Isn't there just one option? There's actually a couple different options. So the key question when you form an LLC is it actually can be taxed like a corporation where you retain profits, or it can be taxed like an S corporation where profits flow through. So you do have some options, and that's one of the things when you work with NCP. I have a video that covers in more detail those options. At the end of the day, you want to decide, do you want more profits in your business to grow and expand that? Do you need more profits to flow through individually, or maybe it's a combination of both? So those are some of the factors. Now, if we have any of our Canadian friends with us, or if you know someone in Canada, some countries have little nuances with tax treaties. Canada is one of them. So if we have any Canadian attendees, if you set up a U.S. LLC, they don't respect the tax treaty with the U.S. LLC in Canada, and actually you'd be double taxed. It's not the case with Israel. There's actually a court case with the U.K. By setting up a U.S. LLC that happened about a year ago also. So some countries have little nuances. The good news in Israel is pretty straightforward, as Eldad already kind of explained. So again, if you're outside the U.S., you want to look at what are the tax treaties with your country. If you want to write this down or take a picture of it, this is a URL that goes to the IRS code in the U.S. that has a list of all the countries. It's budurl.com/US tax treaties. It's just a redirect to the page, and you can look up Israel, and it's very detailed. You'll probably get bored reading it. That's why you have Eldad, but that's what the tax treaties are. So in generally what happens is if there's a tax treaty like there is with Israel, that means if you pay some taxes in the U.S., you're going to get a full credit in Israel so you're not going to be double taxed on it. And let's say you paid 30% on some of your taxes in the U.S. and in Israel is 35%, then you just pay the 5% difference. That's the simple answer to that. I know Eldad went into more detail on that weekend also. That's generally how it works. Let's go a little bit deeper and kind of take a look at which entity is best for you. So again, at the LLC, the limited liabilities we mentioned, there's 4 tax options. Now, you can be, if you are an individual and you form an LLC with us, it would be what's called a disregarded entity. That's one option. If you could also form the LLC and have it taxed as a C corporation. Now, in the moment, you might say to yourself, well, wait a minute, you said an LLC taxed as a C corporation, is that 2 separate entities? It's really, legally, it's an LLC. The record book says LLC, the name says comma LLC, but from a tax point of view, it's taxed just like a regular corporation. There could be an LLC taxed as an S corporation. Again, this is only for U.S. residents because there's certain shareholder requirements. Then you could have an LLC taxed as a partnership. Now, the good news is when you work with us, we're going to simplify this for you. And we just want you to be aware of that there's different options. And I guarantee if you ever called some of these other online incorporating companies and asked them the 4 different ways LLCs to be taxed, a lot of them may not know those differences. And so the last option is an LLC. Let's say you're a husband and wife. You could set up U.S. LLC taxed as a partnership because you and your wife could be a partner. Maybe you have an outside partner. That could be a partnership. Now, if you had an outside partner and you were going to be in the business together, which I don't always recommend, but it does happen. A lot of time on Amazon, you have individuals mastermind together, but they run their business separately, which probably makes the most sense. You'd have a separate Amazon Seller Central account. You'd have your own entity, and you'd mastermind together. But I have worked with some that have different skill sets, and they've partnered together. So if you're partnered, obviously you're not going to have what's called a single member LLC because you already have more than one member. So the single member LLC disregarded would not be an option for you. It would be a partnership. I will tell you there's a nuance with a husband and wife that we could go either route, and that's something we address when you work with us. So the key thing here with an LLC, what most people miss, is they don't understand that they just file the state articles. They don't get what's called an operating agreement, which is an internal agreement to the LLC, and that really has to match the taxation type and if you're a single or multi-member. So, for example, what that means is if you have a single-member LLC taxed as an S corporation, that's different than a single-member LLC taxed as a C corporation. The operating agreement would be different. And I would tell you that even a lot of law firms don't understand that, and accounting firms, because most companies, they either have a single-member LLC operating agreement or a multi-member LLC operating. They're templated. We have 6 different operating agreements based upon how many members and how it's taxed. So it's very important that when you work with somebody, these things are done correctly. Now let's talk a little bit about the U.S. strategy when you establish a U.S. legal entity. You know, as we said, an advantage is it also separates liability from your home country. So for some of you, you may already have an existing business in your home country. You may have a certain trade or business you're doing, and maybe the Amazon business is new. Maybe you've always sold your products in a retail store and on your own website, but now you want to sell on Amazon. So for some of you, when you form a U.S. company, the liability from the U.S. business is separate from the business you're doing in Israel. That's why Eldad, in his diagram, he showed you setting up an Israeli company and a U.S. company. And the good news of that is if you happen to get sued in the U.S. company, it won't affect what you're doing in your Israeli company and vice versa. So there's an advantage there. Now, the other big advantage that most people don't consider, and I alluded to it earlier, but I want to repeat myself, is when you have a U.S. company and you're selling to U.S. consumers, and the U.S. market is the largest online e-commerce market in the world by far, is when you have a U.S. company, you develop trust with U.S. consumers. Obviously, if you're selling on Amazon, there's already a massive amount of trust. That's why people go to Amazon. But people are starting to realize that you could be on the Amazon platform, but they're not buying from Amazon. They're buying from some individual company. And when you have a U.S. company, an LLC or corporation, that helps develop trust with the U.S. market, which is very important, because if I'm a U.S. consumer, I'm buying on Amazon. And I've bought a couple things where I thought I was buying on Prime and I'd get it in 2 days. I bought one thing, it took like 35 days to get, and you know, it eventually came, but I knew if I had problems with customer service, even though Amazon regulates it, I didn't want to go chase some other company in some other country selling this to me. So fortunately, it's a very inexpensive product. It was a case cover for a Mac computer for one of my daughters, but it took forever to get there because I wasn't paying attention. I would have. Now, obviously, that didn't have anything to do with the U.S. company. It just they weren't, you know, shipping through FBA, and you know, I was a Prime member. So again, there's a benefit of establishing a U.S. brand and doing it properly. Then you want to have a proper U.S. presence. That means a U.S. address, a U.S. bank account. So this looks like a legitimate U.S. company, not just a P.O. box or a mail service address. And if you do get into contracts, because I've had some Amazon sellers do business with Walmart and with some other platforms and some bigger companies. I'll share an example with one in a minute. And it's always easier for a U.S. company to do a contract with another U.S. company because the legal fees are going to be less. So there's another really key point when you form a U.S. entity, and this is really, really important, and that means you have to do what's called a complete formation. And most people just file the articles because they did it for a couple $100, and that's all they did, and that's a problem. So what I want to make sure you do is avoid what we call the $99 trap. This is where, from a marketing point of view, nothing wrong with marketing, but what a lot of these online companies do, they'll get you in the door, and they'll file articles, get you an EIN number, and they'll act as your registered agent, and you go to Amazon, you update your account with your new entity and your new EIN number, and that's kind of what you needed to update Amazon. You might be using World First to move your money. You might be using Amazon. I saw somebody post something about Payoneer. If you're doing individually, you might be using Payoneer. So in your mind, you might be saying that's all I need at the moment. Now, keep in mind with Payoneer, by the way, as a side note, they only work with individuals. If you form an entity, then you can't use Payoneer, at least up until very recently. That's how the way they've always worked, is for individual accounts. So now, I've done lots of interviews over the years with professionals. I've actually done over 70 different interviews, probably another 30, 40 webinars. And one of the top attorneys in the United States I interviewed, his name is Lee Phillips. He's actually has been involved in cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. And I talked to him about these $99 incorporating companies because he's been involved in a lot of lawsuits representing people suing these type of companies. And he told me, Scott, he goes, when you use these cheap online services, most entities that people formed would provide zero protection. Zero protection because they didn't do it properly, and they actually have unlimited liability because all they did is file articles. There's no record book. There's no formalities. They didn't run it as a separate legal entity. And a lot of people have a false sense of security because they didn't do these things properly. So it's very, very important that when you form an entity, we do it properly. So let me give you the complete formation checklist, and you can write these down, take a picture, screenshot, whatever works for you, the screen. So the first step is you got to determine which state entity is best for you, which is critical. We talked a little bit about that. That's really important. You want to make sure your U.S. name is checked at the state level that you're forming, also at the federal trademark database. Now, you separately may or may not trademark your name. That's a different step, but we at least want to check your name at that level to make sure you're not in any obvious conflicts. You want to get your articles filed at state. You want to have a registered agent service. You want to make sure you have a complete LLC or corporate record book. That means if it's an LLC, you have the correct operating agreement. Proper IRS tax election is filed. And you want to make sure the record book's completed and the formalities are done on an annual basis at a minimum. Very important to keep that protection ongoing. And also to get what's called an EIN number. Now, I know many of you know how to get an EIN number. You've seen steps online. You call the IRS, you get one. But you're still filling out a form. You're still answering important questions, the IRS. You want to make sure everything adds up. So it's very important it's done properly. Oops, there's another bullet there about issuing stock and membership interest, very important in the proper formation. So we also want to set up a U.S. bank account. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Ori talked about the difficulty of coming to the U.S. I will tell you, even in California, Nevada, we've had people that have flown here, and even though they show up in person, they still won't open up the bank account in some cases unless you have an ITIN number, or they can see your physical office and see employees that are working there. So not all states are like that. Obviously, if you go to, sometimes in Florida, the East Coast, they will do it. But I've had people even have difficulty when they've come here in person. Now, you want to have a U.S. address and mail support, not just a P.O. box, something that looks like a legitimate address service. A lease agreement's ideal. You want to be able to capitalize your company, meaning you want to be able to put money into the bank account as capitalization if you're the owner of the company, for example. That's an important step. And, of course, you want to work with somebody that understands U.S. taxes and tax trees. We have a tax firm we work with very closely that does all our international clients. Obviously, with Ori, the good news is you work with somebody that really speaks your language, literally, with Eldad that can work with between Israel and the U.S., which is a great resource too. If you ever had an overflow, and I've talked to him several times, very, very sharp guy, knows this stuff backwards and forwards. So you're in good shape there. We, of course, work with folks too. So your best option when it comes to business formation, the easy process, of course, is to work with us. We do the complete formation. When it comes to choice and entity in state, I have a 30-minute video I've done, which is a PowerPoint. I go down into more detail to make it very simple for you. And then our team does a 30-minute consultation, which is included in our package if you have any final questions. Then they go through, okay, here's the state fees are separate. What name do you want to use? Who's going to be the manager? Who's going to be the director? And they go through the process, and they send you an email to verify to send it back. It's a very turnkey process. When you become a client of ours, then you get access to all our professional resources. And you might say, well, Scott, you already showed us who they are. But obviously, it's a night and day difference if we do a personal introduction. We have at least 14 templated introduction emails that we email to different professionals, and when they get an introduction from us and from me, they respond to it much faster, let's be honest, higher quality level of service, better response time. So that's, again, a big value when you work with us. Now, let's transition. We'll take a pause for a moment. We've talked quite a bit about U.S. entities and strategies. Now we're going to talk a little bit about, we'll call it metaphors, use the elephant in the room, about sales tax. Is it required? How does it work? So I'm going to pause for a moment, Ori, to see if you have any comments at this point. Then we'll move into talking about sales tax for several minutes here. Then, of course, at the end, we'll go through all the questions. But, Ori, any comments or feedback up until this point?
Not really. I see that we have some questions, but we can, fill the gap at the end.
Absolutely.
Guys, please, be patient. Stay at the end. Scott will answer most of your questions. The one which we will manage to answer. So please stay until the end. Scott, I think you can continue. It looks good so far. Looks great.
Wonderful. So let's continue. As Ori said, I have a couple of special surprises for you at the end, so you definitely want to stay at the end. And this part is going to be really important, what we're talking about next. And so first, the power of Amazon is there's over 95 million monthly unique visitors. 95 million unique visitors. These are buyers. I'm like a lot of U.S. consumers and global consumers. I'll go to a website. I could get a Facebook ad for a product. If I like the product, I'm pretty much going to go to my Amazon account and buy it. I do 90% of my online shopping I do through Amazon. And so that's the power of Amazon. You already know that. We had a client, because of their success on Amazon, they had a product in the nutrition business. It was a probiotic. And because they had such good marketing and they had so many reviews on their probiotic product, they got contacted by a huge brand in the U.S. called The Biggest Loser. It's a TV show website where basically very overweight people go through this process. It's like a big boot camp, and they lose all this weight. So it's a huge TV show success. And now his probiotic product is being, it's under the name The Biggest Loser, and it's on their website. So it's a huge home run for him. And it started because he was very successful in Amazon. He had all these great reviews. And he's the one that, you know, when I talk about U.S. contracts, he had to kind of get a U.S. contract because he had this huge opportunity. So a lot of things could happen. So let's talk about what is sales tax. It's a tax that in the U.S. is added to the price of goods, different than the VAT tax you might have in different countries through the EU, and I believe in Israel, where it's already part of the price. In the U.S., it's added to the price of tax. We're a little bit backwards in most countries around the world. We add it to the price of the sale, and it's usually a percentage of the purchase price, anywhere from 5 to 8%. And it's collected by the seller, that would be you, and you're basically an unpaid collection agent. In other words, you have to collect the money and give it back to the state, and you don't get paid any money. It's like being an unpaid affiliate. So, and when you give it back to the state, it's called remitting. That's the language, remit or give back, and you have to give it back properly, whether it's to the state, county, or district or city level. Now, the good news, there's some services that do this for you as far as the remitting part automatically to make it very low cost for you. So, but it's important to understand this. Now, you've all seen this on Amazon, where if you go in and purchase an order, they will have, in many cases, estimated tax to be collected. Now, one of the things in talking to Ori that he's pointed out with Amazon is that just recently, about 30 days ago, they automatically have a tax collection box. Whether it's zero or not is a different subject, but now it's on almost every order. And so I, as a consumer, has bought many products online without sales tax. Some are subject to sales tax, but we're going to talk more about it. But this is where it's going to show up in the shopping cart when somebody buys on Amazon. Now, let me talk about some sales tax myths. I'm going to expose these, and we're going to kind of just get right to the chase here. Now, again, my research started 2 years ago with a lady who's a CPA who represented in front of Congress what's called the Marketplace Fairness Act, which is pending federal legislation. See, she is an Amazon CPA guru, and I did a webinar with her. I consulted with her for many, many hours. I've consulted with many of the big sales tax firms. So the key thing you got to understand is there's a reason there's sales tax settings on Amazon Seller Central. They're there for a reason, because in many situations it's required. There's a reason Amazon is partnered with 4 global sales tax firms or tax firms. It's because it's required, and they're providing a resource for you. So, but let's jump into these. So a lot of people tell me, Scott, even in the U.S. they'll say, you know what, until federal legislation passes on sales tax, collecting and remitting sales tax is not required for FBA sellers. That's the myth. That's the misconception. Even attorneys, I've heard them say, well, they haven't passed federal legislation. So the key thing, and the fact is, federal law is separate from state law, and this is where people get a little bit confused, is the difference. So state law is separate. In fact, sales tax nexus at the state level, there's cases and guidelines that are already in place. So regardless of what happens at the federal level, there's already state cases that are in place, and I'm going to break it down to you. So the most famous one is there was a U.S. Supreme Court case called the Commerce Clause, which is due process, and there was a case about the Quill Corporation, and this applies to sales over the Internet. So this is back in actually 1992, and it says a seller has nexus or a business presence in a state in which the order is to be shipped, the seller would have to collect or remit those taxes. So I'll get more into this in a minute and I'll simplify it, but long story short, there's been cases around since 1992 at the state level. These things have been figured out. I will tell you that many of the states are getting more and more aggressive, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So there are no federal laws that have been passed yet. There's only what's called proposed legislation, and it goes by several different names. One is called the Marketplace Fairness Act. There's another one called the Remote Transaction Parity Act. There's another one called the Online Sales Simplification Act. Regardless of this proposed legislation, state laws are still in effect. Therefore, you have to collect and remit in states where you have what's called sales tax nexus, which I'll break that down for you in a moment. We'll talk about that. So that's the first area that we hear feedback about. Oh, no federal laws have been passed, therefore we can just skip it. Well, state laws are separate. So now a lot of folks bring up this from a marketing point of view. They'll say, my competitors who are not charging sales tax have a 5 to 8% price advantage. Now, if you go to Europe and in the EU, especially in UK, which is the biggest Amazon market, then Germany's next, what happens over there is in the UK, you know, they have the VAT tax, and it goes up to about 20%. And the UK is losing so much revenue from Chinese sellers because Chinese sellers are not registering for VAT. They're not collecting or remitting VAT. So over there, it's a 20% price advantage. But what's happening in the UK, when I talk to these big companies over there, the courts of the UK are requiring Amazon to have people have a VAT registration when they set up their UK Amazon account. That's just been happening recently. In fact, now they're actually going over after VAT firms in the UK to say that they could be liable if they represent a foreign seller, because if the foreign seller doesn't collect or doesn't remit VAT, they may go after the company providing the service, which is really crazy. Long story short, the scrutiny is very tight on Amazon. They're changing some of their algorithms and platforms. It's due to be updated by November coming up. Now, this comes from really inside information from somebody who works very closely with Amazon. I can't give away my resource, of course, but these things are happening. So we hear this often about price advantage. The fact is, if you're not in compliance, you're risking severe penalties and interest in an audit, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So in my opinion, and many other marketers, not paying sales tax long-term may put you out of business for good, because 2 years ago, the states lost over $28 billion in sales tax. And every day I get links to court cases on different states going after different Amazon sellers, e-commerce sellers, big companies. In fact, some states are setting up thresholds like they have over in the UK that says if you do a certain amount of sales amount, we don't care whether you have nexus or not, you got to collect and remit sales tax. So some people will say, well, the cost of compliance is too expensive. They went to a CPA and they said, you know, for me to get you registered in 10 different states, get you sales tax permits, do all the reporting, it's going to be $5,000 or more. The fact is, if your CPA did all this for you with sales tax, it would be expensive. So if you get support for sales tax guidance, sales tax permitting, remitting sales tax, they're all very reasonable. It's a fraction of the cost. So you just got to look at the right place. So, and the challenge is, and I know what happens is if you have a CPA, and this is why I really like talking to Eldad, because Eldad was very much about to say that he's not an expert on sales tax. He can do sales tax in the state he's in Virginia, but when it comes to Amazon and sales tax, well, that's a very specific niche. That would be like going to if you needed heart surgery and you want to go to a doctor, you're not going to go to a general practitioner, you're going to go to a heart surgeon, the specialist. Sales tax is a specialist, so don't be surprised if you worked with a CPA firm in the past or another accounting firm and you're hearing something different. I've worked with the experts in sales tax specifically. So it's a very specific niche. So some people say, well, there's lack of state audits, so I'll just take the chance. So the states are not tracking or auditing FBA sellers. Well, the fact is, as I mentioned, e-commerce sales are dramatically going up. The states are losing more and more revenue, and they're not waiting for federal legislation. So, for example, in the state of Texas, which is one of the 2 or 3 biggest states where your inventory is likely to be in, they have a task force where they'll go look at your company online, look at your product at Amazon. They actually go buy products online, and they will reverse engineer to catch somebody who's not registered. California, they will track FBA sellers in a similar manner because California is the biggest state in the U.S. And if you have 500 reviews on your product, the odds are your inventory is in California. And if you're not collecting remitting sales tax in California, it's so easy for them to figure that out. Colorado, very interesting. It's not an FBA state, but they're actually going after residents for use tax. What that means is in the United States is if I live in Colorado and I buy your product online through Amazon, and let's say that you should have charged me sales tax, but if I didn't pay sales tax, I got to pay the other side of it's called use tax, which is the same percentage, by the way. I have to volunteer it individually. So what Colorado is saying is we're not going to wait for these e-commerce sellers to get in compliance with sales tax in our state. We're just going to go audit the users. So imagine what's going to happen if there's Amazon Prime customers in the state of Colorado getting audited for use tax when they're going to point the finger back to Amazon and their Prime sellers and say, how come you're not telling your sellers how to properly collect sales tax? So my bet is you're going to see something in the next year or two happen because this gap is closing. So here's the worst part is average sales tax audits. It's the worst audit you could suffer in the U.S. There are a 6 to 7 year lag time. In other words, it's 6 to 7 years before they catch up with you, and the penalties and interest, penalties could average anywhere from 10 to 30% plus interest. So the numbers can get quite high, and as I mentioned, the states lost over $28 billion in sales tax 2 years ago. So there's big numbers. Now, some folks will say, well, there's a tax treaty exemption. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Since you know, the myth is there's no tax treaty with my country, or it should say there is a tax treaty with my country. Therefore, I don't have to pay sales tax because I don't pay U.S. taxes because of the tax treaty. Federal tax treaties offer income tax protection at the federal level, but U.S. states do not recognize tax treaties. It's at the state level. It's between U.S. and foreign countries. They're called bilateral tax treaties. So it's a very, very important distinction. That's why sales tax is different than federal income tax. The result is a foreign seller is not subject to U.S. federal income tax typically if you just have a foreign company and you're what's called a non-permanent establishment, things that Eldar would help you with. But you're still subject to U.S. sales tax. Now, if we form a U.S. company, then you're doing business here, you'd be subject to U.S. income taxes, and then you still have the tax treaty as far as your home country. So it's very important. So the other thing we hear is just in general is, of course, all the misinformation opinions. It varies from very conservative to aggressive. We avoid aggressive strategies. I'm going to tell you squeaky clean conservative. Now, you individually, if you decide not to collect and remit sales tax, that's your choice. I think it's a bad choice. The bottom line is, in our opinion, based on all the research we've done, you've got to collect and remit sales tax if you want to be a legitimate brand and be around for 2 to 3 or 4 years from now. So the key question is, where do you have sales tax nexus? Remember, that means a business presence. Of course, we'll dive down into that. We'll talk a little bit more. I'll give you an example of sales tax nexus. But first, you got a really an important decision to make if you've been doing business or going to be doing business in Amazon. That is it a business decision to collect and remit sales tax? And I hear this talked about online. Well, it's a business decision. I may or may not do it. But it's really, I don't agree with that. Here's why, because I think it's really a different question. And the question I have for you to ask you is, are you running a real business or a hobby? I mean, a hobby is something you do for fun, like the doll case. Unfortunately, she got sued for big bucks. If you're running a real business, building a brand, sales tax is required where your business has nexus, and paying sales tax is not really a business decision. And then the question is, what type of decision? It's really a cash flow decision. Why? Because each day that goes by, you're selling on Amazon without collecting and remitting sales tax, you're paying sales tax out of your own pocket. So that's the problem. So this could be a fast-building debt for some of you. So the question becomes, you know, when can you afford to pay and collect and remit sales tax? So that's, we help you through that process is what you need to do. Now, let's take a step backwards. So we've talked about sales tax. We've talked about it's required, squeaky clean, conservative. Let's take a step back and look at the states with sales tax. There's 45 states in the District of Columbia with sales tax in the U.S. There's 5 states in the U.S. because we have 50 states without sales tax. Alaska, Montana, New Hampshire, which is an FBA state, Delaware, which is an FBA state, and Oregon. Those are the 5 states without sales tax in the U.S. Okay? So sales tax nexus is a connection to the state. It's called a physical presence. Some examples of things that could create sales tax nexus are if you had an office in a state like Nevada or Wyoming. If you had employees. Now, you're not going to have employees in the U.S., but if you lived in the U.S. and you hired an employee, that would be different. If you went to trade shows often, that could create a presence in a state. If you use a third-party logistics company, which is a warehouse, so if you're storing inventory or stock and you're using fulfillment by Amazon, that creates nexus, having inventory. And I'd be more than happy to talk about the state of Virginia or any particular states, but in general, because you use fulfillment by Amazon, that creates nexus. So with sales tax nexus, there's really 2 steps. You have to collect sales tax and you have to remit it, give it back to the state. I was at a recent conference and somebody said to me, well, Scott, I'm collecting sales tax in multiple states, and I thought Amazon remits the sales tax for me. And I said, no, Amazon does not remit sales tax for you. A lot of people get confused when they say Amazon does it for you. You got to ask specifically, what do they do for you? They will allow you to put up sales tax criteria. They will charge sales tax that'll put in your account. Then it's your responsibility to give sales tax back to a state. Now, you don't have to do it because there's services that are very inexpensive that do this for you, but this guy was really creating a problem because it's a major fines if you collect sales tax and you keep it. That's a major no-no. So let's go a little bit deeper. I'll give you an example of nexus and an FBA example. Let's say if, somebody lived in the United States, if you had a Minnesota home office, that's where I'm from, by the way, that's where I grew up in the U.S. Obviously, you're outside the U.S., you might have a Nevada home office that looks more like our office. So let's say your inventory is in 5 FBA states. In this situation, you would have nexus in 6 states, your home state plus the 5 FBA states. Now, in our case, a lot of you will incorporate Nevada, which happens to be an FBA state. So if your inventory is in Nevada, you might only just be in 5 states. If you live in the U.S. and you have a home office in another state, then we get to, in this example, a 6. So this means you would collect and remit sales tax for customers in those 6 states who buy from you with an when they're buying and they put in their address from those states. That's where the tax settings would appear, and you would get the sales tax would go in your bank account. Then at the end of the quarter, typically, you would give it back to the state through a service. That's very simply how this works. Now, in order to get to, once you figure out that you have sales tax nexus and where your inventory's at, and we do training to share with you how to figure out where your inventory's at. Now, you need to get what are called sales tax permits where you're in the different states where your inventory's at. So you need to collect and remit sales tax, so you have to complete the state's sales tax application correctly. Now, there's good news and bad news. Some states are easy. Some states are hard and tricky, especially if you're an international seller, which is 98% of you. The problem is There's 7 FBA states where you have to submit a paper application. You can't even do it online. There's one state that if you don't have a U.S. Social Security number, you can't even collect. You can't even get a sales tax permit, so that's a problem. So, right? So there's some challenges there. So you can't collect sales tax until you have a sales tax permit or a license. So I hope that makes sense. So step 1 is to figure out where your inventory or stock is at, which FBA states, to get sales tax permits. Once you get sales tax permits, then you have to tell Amazon to collect sales tax, and that's where you update your Amazon tax settings. So probably most of you, when you started with Amazon, you skipped all that because you didn't was required. Now, again, the next step is to remit sales tax that you have collected. That means giving sales tax back to the state. Now, in life, you can do things yourself, and you can have it done for you, just like you could. This couple is fixing their own deck, or you could do painting in your house. This is not an area where I'd recommend you do it yourself. There's companies that do it for you very inexpensively, maybe $50 a month, and then $30 a sales tax return per state, might be once a quarter. So if you're in 10 states times 30, it might be $300. Very inexpensive to have this done for you. So the easy button for sales tax compliance, currently there's 19 FBA states with sales tax. Potentially, if you're doing $30,000, $40,000 a month in sales or more, you might be in 16, 17 states. If you're just doing $2,000 or $3,000 a month, you might be in 3 or 4 states potentially. So the stock or inventory creates nexus. Sales tax permits, you may be up to 19 states. And as you may or may not know, the challenge with Amazon, as your sales go up, they move your inventory to different states. So even though your inventory might have started in 5 or 6 states, 3 months later it might be in another 6 states. So you need to consistently get more sales tax permits and kind of monitor this. But we have a service that we help this process to simplify it for you. Again, once you get your sales tax permits, you update Amazon Seller Central tax settings. Now, if you're behind on sales tax, there's some different approaches to that. We provide training and a webinar for what are called our sales tax system members, and I'll show you what this looks like in a minute. So we have a membership training area that walks you through all this, that simplifies it. What happens when you become a member, you get access to our membership area, and there's 5 major tabs, and the first one talks about what's your business structure, how do you transition. There's webinars on that. We talk a little bit more detail about sales tax nexus. Some of you may say, I don't need to learn any more about it. I got it. Then we have the FBA states where you can do it yourself, and we walk you through step by step how to get your own sales tax numbers. Once you get your numbers, you can update Amazon Seller Central. We go through steps how to do it. If you don't want to do it, we have a company that will do it for you. And then a couple different companies we recommend to remit sales tax. If you don't want to go through the steps to get your own sales tax forms for $75 a state, we'll get it for you. We have some bonuses and wonderful support. And this is what the drop-down menu looks like. We have every state, FBA state, and there's step-by-step instructions, all the right links. There's a phone number to the state if you have a question on that particular state form. Or if you want us to do it for you, you can go through our process and pay 75 times 10 states, $750. As a sales tax system member, you got to be a member first. We will go through the process to get the sales tax permits for you. We also have a resource if you don't know how to figure out where your inventory is at. We show you the steps through Amazon how to do that, but we also have a service we recommend. It's only $29 one-time fee, and they'll pull a report and tell you in a simple 2-page outline where your inventory is at when you first had inventory. So that is called Sales Tax System. And what I'm going to do is just for a couple minutes share with you how we can help you, whether you want a U.S. entity, a U.S. bank account, or support with sales tax. Then we'll go into questions and answers here in a couple minutes. We do have some very special, I would say, discounts here for you as being part of Ori's group. So this is my invitation to work with us at NCP. So again, your U.S. strategy is one of 3. You could operate as a sole proprietorship, is common starting out, simple but most liability. You could obtain your own US EIN number, or we could do that for you. We have a fee for that. You could set up a bank account, which I'll cover in a couple minutes. Some of you may use your Israeli company, and in that case, that's simple. You do have liability to your home country business, but if this is your only business, that could be an option. You also will need a US FEIN number to get sales tax permits. Again, I'd recommend you do it with us. So even though you could call the IRS and get it over the phone, there's a lot of questions to get done correctly, and you want to have a U.S. bank account because we'll talk about that in a minute, the many benefits of having a U.S. bank account. Or a lot of you may want to just go straight ahead and form a U.S. entity. That's the best approach. You have the most, there's more steps, but the most liability protection, you build a U.S. brand. So these are really the three categories you probably fall into most likely, and we can help you in either category. So if you're going to look at step number 3, which is form a U.S. company, we have a PDF. Some of you may have seen it before, where we go through our complete formation, and we form a U.S. company, and we go through everything from the video consultation. We review the entity name. We check it at the state and federal level. We file the articles, registered agent. We do the record book, correct operating. We ship it to you. We have training videos in our members only about each step of the record book keeping and compliance. In this case, we give you the federal tax ID number because in this situation, we use our U.S. address. We have to fax it to the IRS and follow up multiple times. And it comes complete with a U.S. address linked to our office here, which I'll show you in a couple minutes, for 12 months. That's the complete formation plus. That's $19.97. The reason this price is different here is the $19.97 you pay for the address service and the phone support for the entire year, so you get an extra discount. In fact, the discount is over $465 because this you pay for it month by month for 12 months. So most people will look at the complete formation plus to set up a U.S. entity. Includes the U.S. bank account without travel, the deposit to open your bank account, which is your money. The minimum's $1,000. The bank fee is about $20 a month. If you want to put in $5,000, not required. That'll avoid the monthly fee, but not required. So this is an overview, which I'll show you again in a moment, of our package to form a U.S. company for you. And what you're going to receive when we set up, so we're going to form the U.S. company. You'll get the 30-minute consultation with our team. You'll get the video overview. We'll file the articles, registered agent, the complete record book. We're going to ship the record book to you internationally. That costs us like $100. That's part of the package. We'll get the tax ID number. You'll get the address service for the full 12 months and a phone setup. This is our office in the U.S. This is a law firm. We lease one of the spaces on the first floor facing the freeway in Las Vegas. Is 215. So we're on the other side. I'm looking out the window right now at the freeway here. So it's not a P.O. box. It's not a just a mail drop. If somebody searches your address, they're going to see a real building in the U.S. And so we'll also set up the U.S. bank account without travel. You get great support. Any email questions, send it to us. NCP members, we have videos on each step of the process. We have other teleseminars. Then you get access to our professional resources. For example, if you want to get a work visa in the U.S., it's not required unless you're coming here to do work, of course, but most of you are going to operate from your home country. We have a webinar on that. We have a resource for it. If you want to set up a U.S. merchant account, obviously you don't need it for Amazon, but maybe you need it separately. We have resources for that, training, taxes, of course. If you need a legal contract, you need a referral, all those resources available. So when you do the 1997 complete formation with the postage deposit, which is just a deposit, that total is $21.47 plus state fees. The state fees varies if we do Nevada or Wyoming. And of course, your $1,000, that's your money, you'll wire into the bank account a few weeks later. So the first 21 that register today on the webinar, or those who watch on the replay, I know we maxed out at 100 people here. What we're going to do is we're going to have an extra special training for you where I'm going to do a webinar where I'm just going to answer Q&A. We're going to do some now, but once you get started, you're going to have lots of questions, and you might want access to my resources. Who should I go to? I'm just going to do Q&A It's with me personally. I'll answer any of your post-formation questions during the process. Maybe you have other businesses going on. Anything on taxes, sales tax. I'm not going to do a whole training like this because I'm just going to go in and you'll email your questions ahead of time, and I'm going to go through, after you're set up, all the questions you have on any of these subjects for you, any business strategies. My minimum fee is $400 an hour to consult. So you're going to get access to me on this live webinar for 60 to 90 minutes, as much time as we need, because it's just going to be answering your questions. It's on June 9th, so it's coming up in a little over a week. It's going to be recorded. You'll get access to the replay. You'll be able to hear other people's questions. You're going to have, basically my PhD in 19 years of research chunked down into the questions that you need addressed. And it's a $697 value. It's free for the first 21. Plus, what we're going to do is we're going to save you $300 for the first 21. So we're going to take $300 off instead of $21.47 because you're on the webinar. The first 21, it's only going to be $18.47. Again, the state fees and bank deposit will be separate. Here's the link for you to get started. If you go to budurl.com/entity so simple, it'll take you to our Infusionsoft page, and you need this discount code, entity so simple. So when you enter that code, it'll take $300 off the price. And in a minute, I'm going to give you a summary of this, but if you want to take a screenshot of this page, budurl.com/entity so simple, that is the code for the one, and I'll probably copy and paste them here in the end for everybody. So that's step one. If you want to form a U.S. entity, we're going to save you $300 for the first 21. If you want to set up a U.S. bank account, maybe you already have an entity, but you don't have a bank account. Maybe you're using your Israeli company. We will set up the bank account without travel to the United States. We're going to send you an email. We have a relationship, or you said at the beginning with Citibank. Citibank does not do this normally. If you go to Citibank and ask them about it, they don't do this process. I worked with a major law firm out in New York with one of the biggest partners, does business globally, does billion-dollar merger acquisitions, and he referred me to the international division. And I have a very close contact, and we do it properly. We will send you an email with all the forms, video steps. It's actually Citibank's forms to fill out. You will need to get verified in your home country, as Ori mentioned at the beginning, going to Tel Aviv. We have steps for that. You will get an email from us with the steps to review. You will email back to NCP your bank application, your ID, some other forms that we need. We will forward that on to the bank, and the bank will open your account. You will get an email to wire your money into the account, which is $1,000 minimum. That'll get your initial deposit, and then you will mail the original application directly to the bank. You'll have the address, you'll have the person to send it to, very important. You will also get a debit card with a PIN number for online access from anywhere in the world, and that will be sent to you separately. That's a couple weeks later. This process takes about 4 to 6 weeks. Most of it depends upon how long it takes you to fill out the form and the instructions. You get us to a couple days. If you follow the instructions closely, you complete everything. We have a sample application. You can follow it step by step. And if we get everything, within that first week and we get it off to the bank, now keep in mind, the bank doesn't take phone calls. They work with bank customers. They're doing us a favor looking at email. Like to make sure everything's done properly the first time to speed up the process, and so they can open the account over the next week or two. Next couple weeks, send out your debit and credit card. So process could take 6 weeks. Some people it's taken longer because they've taken 4 weeks to get the initial forms to us. So that's the process. The first 21, and I've never offered this really individually other than to our clients or people. I've never offered the bank account, honestly, because there's only so many bank accounts we want to set up because we want to manage the volume because it's a separate process they're doing for us. Our bank account price is currently $797. That currently, about a month ago, the price did go up. Right now, we're going to do for you is save you $200, which is not our current price. If you call today at $797, We had people yesterday ordered it. They paid $7.97, but because you're part of Ori's group, first 21 are going to save $200. Here's the Bud URL to order the bank account separately. Now, if you're ordering the U.S. entity, you don't need to purchase this. That's part of the U.S. entity. So if you go to budurl.com, bank so simple, and here's the discount code to take $200 off. Bank so simple. You type in that discount code to the page. That'll save you $200 and set up your U.S. bank account. Please do not share this URL with anybody else. We only want to work with Ori's members if you're a part of his group, so don't pass it on to your friend if they're a member, please. We like to work with relationships of people we know, and that's why we're making this offer on the bank account separately, which we have not done before. It's always been part of our U.S. entity or people that contact us through relationships. Last but not least, the sales tax system. If you want support with that, we have our sales tax system membership. It's a 12-month membership. You'll get access to the business structure training, sales tax nexus, the FBA states if you want to get the sales tax permits yourself, the steps on how to update Amazon Seller Central, our companies we recommend to remit sales tax. Their fees are separate. Remember I said about $50 a month at the low end to about $100 per month is what they range. And then you have your sales tax permits. That's the only way to get access to our $75 per state service to get sales tax permits. Some people have said, can I just buy it separately? You have to be a member of sales tax system to get access to service. That's why it's only $75 a state. And then we have awesome email support. You'll again get access to the membership. We'll send you username and password within about 48 hours. You'll be able to log on to the system. Most of you are going to want to go right to this tab, tab number 3. There's a link on the first part to determine where you currently have inventory, or you can go to Amazon Seller Central. There's a couple tips. Once you get to the dashboard, you want to watch this 19-minute overview video. It'll take you through the whole process here. So again, some of you may want to do it yourself. I think most of you are probably going to want to go to our $75 state service, have us give you sales tax numbers. Because you're outside the U.S., it takes us anywhere from about 2 to 4 weeks to get your sales tax permits. Once you get them, you're going to go back to Amazon Seller Central and update your tax settings, and you're going to work with the remit services that we recommend for you. So that membership is only $497 for the year. It's ticket support only. It's not phone support. You send us emails. Right now, we're going to save you $100. It's going to be $397 for a full 12 months of access, whether you're just getting up and running. The Bud URL is budurl.com/STS so simple. I should say it's case sensitive, especially on the discount code. So you put in the discount code STS so simple, you get $100 off. Again, please don't share this with anybody. This is just for yourselves as members of Ori's group. What I'm going to do is just summarize. You can get started. For the U.S. entity formation, you'll save $300. U.S. bank account individual, you'll save $200. Sales tax system is $100. And we'll pause for a moment for questions so you can take a picture or print screen of the different ways we can help you here. Again, we're just doing the first 21 only to save. What's going to happen, it's also first come, first serve, especially when it comes to U.S. entity, because we need to set an appointment to do a consultation with you. So as the orders come in, that's when we'll be reaching out to you to schedule an appointment. We'll talk to you on Skype. We'll send you the video. The bank accounts are a lot easier because if you order a bank account separately, you're going to get access to an email within 24 hours. Then I'll send you all the next steps to follow up. Sales tax system will add you to the membership within 24 to 48 hours. So I'm going to pause, take a sip of water while I still give my voice a rest for a moment. Ori, I'll turn it back to you for a couple minutes, then let's dive into questions after that.
Thank you so much, Scott, for enlightening us. Thank you so much. Guys, I strongly suggest you to take a print screen. I will say it also in Hebrew. חברים, אני ממליץ לכם בחום לקחת צילום מסך כרגע של מה שיש לכם פה. What Scott is offering here is limited to the only first 21 people who will order this offer. If you want to be relaxed when it's related to tax, if you want to do it right, you've got like a unique opportunity to do it right and do it the right way with a big discount. Like Scott, what Scott is offering here is a one-stop shop. When I first started with Amazon, and I was like scared, shit scared, like from the taxes and from everything, and I didn't have someone like Scott who will guide me and tell me, hey, this is what you need to do, and this is how you're doing it right. Okay? Now, if you want to do it right and do it the right way, this is the right way to start. This is the best way to start. No one else will know better, is know better than Scott how to do it right and how to set up all correctly. When I was starting, selling on Amazon, it was all like Chinese for me, and I didn't know what to do and what to define, all the the definition and the settings for the tax on my account. No one is doing that, and I bet none of you is doing that. And I strongly advise you to take Scott's offer for the sales tax system. There is a reason why Amazon is added this tiny miny line, I guess, which is like sales tax, like a month ago. As Scott said, Amazon is probably planning something, and the day Amazon will say, put up an announcement that say that, hey guys, all of the sellers on Amazon need to align and must report their taxes. I believe we're all going to be in a big problem if you're not going to do it right. So that's a unique opportunity to start do things right, okay? And I guess, everyone who's not doing things right or not really familiar with what he's doing, there is a one corner in his heart when he's not sleeping well, and he's maybe he's not really worried about it now, but when this announcement from Amazon is going to arrive and Amazon is going to say, hey guys, you need to align, you need to pay taxes, and you have until November, for example, to align straight, then you will start worried. And Amazon is putting announcements like this from time to time. So I'm not advising no one to be on a way when he needs to, I don't know, do something to end his business on Amazon. This is not worth it. Do it right, okay? So that's what I advise you guys, and we are gonna answer some questions now. So anyone who would like, Scott, are you ready for some questions? If it's possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do the questions. Why don't you monitor those? And I do want to point out that, Ori, what I do like about you is, and you should know this because it's not typically the case, Ori doesn't take any kind of an affiliate fee or cut or anything. He just wanted to save his students the most amount of money. So there's nothing going back to him. This is just the biggest discount for you. So he just wants the best for you. So I just wanted to add that. But Ori, why don't you go through the questions either in sequence or however you want to do it, or if you want to open up the lines, I'm open. I see quite a few questions. So however you want to handle it, I'll just sit back, answer them. I'll let you monitor it.
Okay, I will let you, everyone who would like to, be raised for a voice chat, he can raise his hand and we will put him on the call. Okay, so I see Oz Yarden. We are putting you on the call. Hello, Oz.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you pretty well.
Hi, Ori. How do you do? How are you?
Great, I'm great.
Wonderful. I'm really excited to talk with you for the first time. Okay, so yeah, thank you. Hello, Scott. How do you do?
I'm awesome. Yourself, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Oz. I have a question. I haven't started to sell on Amazon yet, but I started reading and watching Ori's YouTube and everything, and step by step, but the steps that he has posted in the YouTube and everything, and I wanted to start selling. And my question is, if I start to sell on Amazon, do I need on the first step, on my first selling, okay, to tell Amazon to report, let's say, to report my selling and to report that I need to pay taxes, or do I need to wait and see, let's say, that on the first month that I have 150 sales or 300 sales, and then say, okay, I need to open a business, I need to open a corporation, and only then do I need to call you or anything else, doesn't matter, and to open a corporation and to say that I need to pay those taxes. You understand my question?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Oz, and it's a very common one, actually. So you're thinking through it correctly, and you're attempting to anticipate the timing, right? When do I need to do these things? And so generally what I find and what I recommend is that you can start. Are you starting the account probably in your own name? Is that kind of what we're thinking of doing?
Yeah, my name, but as you said,
Yeah.
You said there are two options in my name, like my name is Oz, and let's say I call this, I don't know, great products, okay? Let's
Sure.
say like that.
So that's very common. So let's say mentally you're in the testing phase. You want to set up the Amazon account, you want to get a product, you want to get it listed, you want to do a few sales, your inventory will go to one state, it might get shuffled to a couple states, and let's say the first month you do, I don't know, $2,000 or $3,000 of sales over a couple months. Keep in mind that's through the entire, U.S., and you might not even do any sales in the states you have inventory in. So you probably, in your situation, if you're just brand new starting, you could probably wait a month or two as things get settled. Then let's say it's 1 or 2 months from now, and you said, okay, I'm doing a couple thousand in sales. Now my inventory's in 3 or 4 states, because you might have only done a couple $100 in sales. You might owe $10 in sales tax. Well, that, as you move forward and you register for sales tax, if you owe $10, you'll just pay the $10 and move forward. So I don't think it's necessary for somebody like you in your case. Again, I don't know your personal situation. I don't know your business and all of that. And you are able to, call our company, and we won't do a strategy session, but we'll give you an overview of what can be done. But I don't know if it's necessary for you to form an entity unless you're the type that says, you know what, I don't want to start in my own name and 2 months later update everything in the entity name. So it depends upon your level of confidence as you move forward. A lot of people will test it in their own name personally, and as they have some success and confidence, then they'll upgrade it. I will tell you an important part is sometimes people will say, I've been selling for a while, and I'm going to get sales tax numbers individually, and then we bring up, well, if you're going to form an LLC or corporation in 3 months from now, you might want to form the LLC or corporation first, then get sales tax permits, because if you get sales tax permits as an individual, then 3 months later you form a corporation, you're going to have to get new sales tax numbers again. But you're not even at that point yet, so I think you're fine to move forward to where you're at, and then you can either decide, I'm going to form an Israeli company that Ori has a relationship with, or you may want to form a U.S. company, which is generally the better approach because the branding, all the other things I spoke about. Now, when you sell individually in the U.S., you probably know you have a couple options to get your money back to your country, which is Amazon will send it back, and it's fairly expensive, about 3.5%, 4%. Or you could use World First. They do it for about half the amount, less than 2%. But you still may want to form a U.S. bank account, save the $200, if you think it's going to be 4 or 5 months down the road before you form a U.S. entity. Obviously, if you form a U.S. entity, that $597 is included. So that's more of a cash flow decision. So does that give you some good thoughts, Oz?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I've got another question. Thank you very much for that.
There are many questions. I'm sorry for interrupting.
One more thing. Just Ori, just about the IRS. Okay, the question is, if you start selling, is there any risk that you will get any letter from the IRS of the United States or something that you didn't pay taxes until now, even if it's 2 months, 3 months, 5 months? Let's say?
So what will happen is, and as we answer these questions, and of course we'll go on to the next one, hopefully this applies to other people. So it is common with the international. Now, if you're 2 months into it, keep in mind you're not going to get any letter from the IRS because it's typically an annual basis. If you're selling individually in the U.S., the business year ends December 31st. Your personal tax return in the U.S. wouldn't be due actually till June 15th in what's called a 1040-NR. If you were audited, it wouldn't be like a year or two later. So it's like 3 years down the road. Some people have been selling individually for several years and they didn't realize, even though there's a tax treaty, they have to file a U.S. tax return, and the treaty disclosures with LDAD covers all that. But if you're just brand new, there's nothing to worry about. You'll be fine.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Oz.
Thank you, Oz. Scott, let's put up another one if it's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, Eden. Eden, how are you?
Hi. Actually, Oz answered already my question. I had the same exact question. And thank you very much for the webinar.
Thank you, Eden.
Oh, you're very welcome, Eden. I'm glad that worked out. It's a very common situation.
Okay, Moti Gottlieb. Moti, are you there? Hello? Moti, okay. Next one is Debbie. Debbie Zilberman.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me, you guys?
Yes, Debbie.
Okay, firstly, thank you very much. Thank you, Ori, and thank you, Scott. This is very useful for me. I'm just going to go through, I've put up a few questions, but I'll just go through a couple. What about incorporating in New Mexico? I read that there are positive things to do, doing that. You didn't mention that.
Yeah, I did mention New Mexico. What happens in New Mexico is like Wyoming, where you don't have to list the manager and state records. New Mexico, there's no annual filing fee, so you save $100. But so if you had to compare it to Wyoming, which is still much more popular, more tested, the only people promoting Mexico are just trying to save a couple bucks, and it really doesn't make other sense to form it in Mexico. But that's the reason it comes up.
Okay. Now, if I have an investment account in the U.S., do I still need also? Can that be counted as a U.S. bank account, or I need an additional bank account?
So you have like a brokerage account, like an E-Trade or something like that?
Yeah, Pershing.
Okay. So you have so let's think about that for a second. There's about 4 states when you get sales tax numbers, they require a U.S. bank account. I have not tested if a brokerage account will be okay. Mm-hmm. One of the primary reasons you want a U.S. bank account, and I think a brokerage account will be able to do it, can you get an ACH from your brokerage account? Can somebody debit the account? Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I have to check.
That would be the question asked, because the reason that's important, remember I mentioned those sales tax firms that remit sales tax that charge the low fees. The reason they're able to charge low fees, and there's other companies that charge much higher fees that do it manually, but the companies that charge the lower fees, what they have to do is they will only ACH a U.S. bank account or something as the ability to ACH, because they automatically pull the funds out, and it's all through technology online. Now, if you use World First, which we're a partner from, then World First doesn't have the ability to do an ACH, so they can't. They will send sales tax, but it's a different story. So if you can ACH, I think that'll help you in remitting, and maybe you might be okay.
So I should probably check with the guy who runs my investment account, to see.
Yeah, send an email to them and say, you know, do they have the ability to do an ACH out of the account? And ask them if the bank numbers and routing numbers are the same numbers as a traditional bank account. If it is, then those other states probably would be fine with that.
Okay, in which case I would be saving myself, in which case I could save myself the $597.
Yeah, absolutely. That could be very possible. Now, the other thing I should say is, I don't know if you have your brokerage account. With a U.S. account, you will get a U.S. debit card. Sometimes that does come in handy. If you already have one, then you're probably okay. Keep in mind, yeah, so that could be the other thing. So, but that could be a possibility to keep you moving forward to save a few bucks, yes.
Okay, and then my last question, which I think is also a question that other people would like to know about, how does one go about getting reseller permits? Because if I'm buying something, if I actually physically visit the states and I'm buying stuff and I want to not pay sales tax in the state that I'm buying, but things that I'm going to be sending to FBA, how does that work?
Yeah, so what we do in sales tax system, we have a link for all the states for the reseller permits, and you're right. One of the first steps is when you get your inventory, you need to produce a resale certificate. So you don't have to be charged sales tax because you're using it for resale. So you know, each state has their own instructions. We've provided the links for members of sales tax. And usually, it depends what type of selling you're doing. A lot of times, it's not happening that often. And so they just got to get a sales tax resale certificate in the state they're domiciled in and set up. But obviously, the step-by-step, I mean, you could obviously research the state remit permit, call the state, have them walk through the steps. You know, it's a little more process, but as you say, those are required in some situations.
Okay, so I'd be looking at the sales tax system mainly if I can get a bank account, if I can use my investment account as a bank account, and if I have an Israeli limited company, then, and I want to use that as my, basically as a regular person but with an Israeli company, and that's enough for me as far as liability, then the sales tax system really is the only thing I'm looking at. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you have a U.S. EIN number with your Israeli company?
No.
Okay, then that would be another step. You can separate. So for you, you're correct. If you don't need the bank account, you can, you know, do that later. If it came into play, then you might just need sales tax system. Separately, we charge $250 to get a U.S. EIN number. I know a lot of people go through the process to get it free. They'll call the IRS and get it because it's easier. If you're a foreigner and you're using your foreign address, you can call over the phone and get it. If you are comfortable doing that, probably get your own. If you don't feel comfortable answering all the questions and doing that, you want us to do it separately, you could send us an email as a sales tax system member and say, I'd like you guys to get an EIN number for you, because you'll need the EIN number to register for U.S. sales tax permits. And so those are your couple options, which, as you said, is probably very common for lots of folks on the webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Debbie. Next one is Michael Caponi. Michael, I hope you're ready. Hey, Michael.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Hi, it's Michael, actually. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Scott, for the webinar. It was really interesting. Listen, actually, I'm a lawyer, and you know, I like to know things, and many people ask me about you know, tax issues and how are we doing about that. Actually, I had a fantastic year last year. I'm already selling in Amazon for over a year. Up until now, it was on my name. I actually opened a company in Israel now, and I have a company in Delaware for totally different reasons, and actually I want to associate it now with my account. Now, what I really wanted to know is basically, you know, I know Israeli, so maybe the question will be good for, you know, all of us. Can you just summarize, I don't know, as short as you can, to what extent are we exposed currently, let's say, at the current situation? Because really, I think you indulged us with a lot of information, but basically, you know, maybe we don't have to worry that much at the present time.
that's a good point, Michael. Are you saying exposed to liability or sales tax?
No, just tax. Just tax, I mean, not liability. Liability, you understand.
No problem.
You explain fantastically.
Are you talking about sales tax liability separately from federal taxes and the treaties, right? You're talking about sales tax, right?
Listen, sales tax is one issue. I'm talking also about IRS and maybe the other taxes. I don't know. Just in general, let's say. We sold and had profits of X amount. What are we exposed to?
Well, because like you mentioned, I think you started selling individually. You started selling through your Israeli company.
No, I'm still selling individually. Although I formed a company, but I'm going to change the name into the Israeli name, and hopefully I'll do the same with the Delaware company and associate it with the account soon.
So a couple of factors you want to look at, and I actually wrote a blog post and all this from A to Z for a company about this stuff. But basically, you know, you have to look at, of course, when you started in your own name, what year was it? Was it 2015, 2014?
15.
Yeah, 2015. So you probably got some kind of tax form from Amazon for income earned last year, right, in 2015?
No, I actually haven't received anything from them yet.
So they should be sending you something, or you might want to check with your accountant, because you know, either you had to fill out a W-8BAN or you know, or maybe they withheld 30%. You know if they did any withholding with your account?
Nothing at all.
Okay.
Everything,
so
all payment received regularly.
Okay, so you probably had some kind of form you filled out with the tax settings initially. They should have sent you something. You may want to check on it. But long story short, individually, you would have to look at, and Eldad would walk you through this, but basically you would have individually, if you earn money in the U.S., you would have a U.S. personal tax return called a 1040-NR. NR stands for non-resident. It's either due April 15th or June 15th. June 15th obviously is coming up in a week or two. I would, in your case, contact Eldad and talk to him about it and try to get access to your Amazon account for what you earned last year. So that's last year, because now who knows, maybe you broke even because you had inventory, you had some sales, you had some expenses, and at the end of the day, there's going to be a tax treaty with the U.S. and Israel, so but you may not even have had any profits last year. If you add up all your expenses, you may have broken even, which is very possible, right? And then, so that's
actually, I'm sure I had a lot of profit, but
you did have some profitability. Okay, good for you. So so you had some profitability, which is great. So you would file a U.S. tax return. It would note what the taxes would be. Then you'd have the tax treaty with Israel. Eldad can handle all that. It would be very simple for him. But I would definitely get a hold of him immediately, like tomorrow, because the 15th is coming next week, and see if he's available to do something for you. Separately, as you mentioned, up until this point, now that year ended December 15th. Now you're in the new year, which started January 1st. So you've still been, my understanding is, selling individually. Now you're kind of in the middle of the year, right? It's June. And so what's going to happen is you're going to be transitioning to using perhaps your Delaware company. It's doing something else, and update your Amazon seller central account from your name to the Delaware company to the EIN number, and update your tax settings. So from June on, any sales go through your U.S. Delaware LLC. And then what's going to happen, because you're in the middle of the year, very common, you're basically going to be doing business individually for another half of the year, which was January through June, and you would have those expenses, and that would show up. And then it depends how your LLC is taxed, whether it's a partnership, single-member LLC, corporation, will determine what happens there for the rest of the year. The good news is, as you move forward through your Delaware company, you'll have more liability protection, because now all the sales will go through that legal entity. And then if you haven't done anything with sales tax, now that entity which is starting the business will apply for sales tax permits moving forward. So that's kind of the process that would be happening in your situation. going back full circle, LDAD would be able to help you with the personal taxes and stuff up to this point. Does that help? I know it may trigger more questions, but that's a general overview.
Basically, I understand that what I have to worry about is the sales tax, the IRS, nothing at the moment, and obviously all the tax treaties with Israel, I'll consult with LDAD and see what will be the difference and what I'll have to add.
So the key thing is, I want to point out, Michael, with the tax treaty, as you mentioned, not that you don't have to worry about the IRS, because you still got to submit tax returns in the U.S. And you know, people get audited if they don't submit tax returns, and they get IRS notices because Amazon is communicating with the IRS because they send you money outside the United States. Now, you may have no taxes pay in the U.S., but you still, as you know, you got to file a U.S. tax return. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, I have to file the audit. Yeah, I understand. That makes it a bit complicated because basically I'm using Israeli accountant, which it's a double filing, but basically this is what I have to do.
Yeah, well, just think about it as, you know, you're doing business U.S., you got to file some return there. You're going to file a return in Israel, and I understand you have, it's just kind of the cost of doing business to generate revenue from Amazon. So charge higher prices, pass it on to your customers.
Okay, thanks very much, and thank you very much for the webinar. Really, it was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Scott, how we are with the time? Can you answer a couple more questions?
Oh yeah, I'm totally fine, and I see there's lots of questions that have been typed in, so I'm fine. If you want to take a few more live questions, I know some people are a little bit shy; they don't want to get on live. And if you want to do a couple, then we can skim through the questions people wrote, and I can attempt to answer those the best I can.
Okay, I will, let you free hand if you would like to answer free questions. Like most of them are written in English, so you can see what you haven't answered. If you can check the questions, because
yes, let me do that. I will. Let me skim through. There's lots of them, so I'm kind of going back to the beginning.
Okay.
And then let me just click on a couple, and I'll, like I say, the ones in English I can read. Somebody mentioned about a Payoneer account early on. I think I mentioned that they support individuals, not entities. Let's see. I have a company in New York. Do I need to pay sales tax in New York? Yeah, if you have a company in New York, that creates nexus. So you want to get a sales tax permit in New York. It's not. It's a little tricky because New York is not really an FBA state, but they have a processing center, and there's a whole different court case on that. But long story short, you need a sales tax permit in New York. Some of these we may have covered with the bigger questions. We talked about New Mexico. Let's see. Let me go to the next one. If I'm currently selling on Amazon, I have an individual Israeli company. How important is to, say there's enough to change my Amazon account to the business account. And we covered that. We talked about New Mexico investment account. We covered that. What do I need in order to get resale permits? Okay, we talked about that. Let's see. If you want to contact our office separately, I have a consulting fee. My team, when you call, what my team will do is find out what you want to accomplish. If you have questions about our services, because we went through them quickly, they'll answer those for you, make a recommendation. If you want to do a consultation with my team separately, you could do that too. They have a fee for that. So let's see. Went through Eden's. Let me see. Sorry, I'm just skimming through. There's lots of them. So for LLC, pay tax first, selling over a certain amount. Okay, I think we covered that. Let's see. Let's see. Should I covered that one. Again, appreciate your patience.
There is a good question here. Is selling on Etsy similar to selling on Amazon from tax point of view? It's asked by Ranan Levy.
Say it again, please. What was the first part of the question?
Ranan is asking, is selling on Etsy is similar to selling on Amazon from the tax point of view?
I see. So Etsy, there's like many different platforms, right? There's eBay, Shopify. So what really happens, you have to look at where do you have sales tax nexus and what creates sales tax nexus. So if you are selling on a platform and your inventory is only, let's say your inventory is not even in the U.S., right? It's shipped overseas and it takes 4 weeks to get somewhere. Well, then you only have sales tax nexus where your company's located in the U.S. If you use one third-party independent warehouse and you ship your stuff from China to that one third-party independent warehouse in the U.S., you're going to have to collect and remit sales tax in the state your company's formed, in the state where that one independent third-party warehouse is. Because if you're not selling through FBA, fulfillment by Amazon, where your inventory moves around, yes, that'll be very similar. So it's very different. The tricky part gets into, and we cover this in sales tax system, if you get into multiple channels, sometimes if you're selling on Amazon and on like eBay, and you end up creating sales tax nexus for both because it's in the same business structure. Doesn't necessarily mean you should have two separate entities, but we cover that training in sales tax system because that comes up. But generally, you just got to look at where you have nexus regardless of the platform. Amazon creates the most nexus because they have warehouses in the most states because, you know, they're focused on this 2-day delivery through Prime.
So in short, it's, you know, from what I understand, it's depends is where is your inventory located, I guess, and where you physically located, your business is physically located, I guess.
Exactly. I work with people in the nutrition niche. In the nutrition niche, they generally just have a company and they have a manufacturer that also ships the products, and so they just have nexus in 2 states typically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Doron P have another question. He's saying that he has like more than one Amazon.com account. I don't think it's legal, but okay. He asks is, do I need an LLC company to each one of these sellers' account, or can I associate all of these sellers' account to one LLC company? I'm not sure that you can create more than one seller account per company. I'm not sure Amazon is allowing that.
Yeah, so you're exactly right, Ori. Amazon has very strict rules about multiple accounts. Have I heard of people doing them? Doing multiple accounts and getting away with it and having your account shut down is a whole separate subject, right? So I can't tell you if you set up 2 LLCs that you could have 2 separate accounts. That's really what you have to do is email Amazon and get something in writing from them if you could, because it really comes down to what the definition of you. Is it you individually? Is it a separate entity? So you really got to get approval from that. My recommendation would be from Amazon. Again, you probably know more about that than I do, Ori, but I can't tell you setting up 2 entities is going to help you, quote unquote, get away with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for me it makes sense. You know, we'll later on take few more calls, and you know, depends on Scott, and you know, it was really intensive for Scott, I'm sure, but you know, as much as you can, Scott, we will appreciate more answers, and for you to educate us.
Let's certainly do a couple more questions. Let me bring up one that nobody's asked yet that you should be asking.
Okay.
Some of you are going to realize you're behind on sales tax. In other words, you've been selling for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and you haven't done anything. I have a special webinar in sales tax system I did as far as what are your options if you're behind on sales tax. We actually have another product called Voluntary Compliance System that can help you waive some of the penalties and interest. So we do provide training on that. We provide an overview because we realize a lot of people may be in that situation. And then, of course, it depends if it's you individually have been selling or if you're forming a new entity, because if you form a new company and it takes over your Amazon account and you apply for sales tax numbers, you can't backdate the application and say this LLC was doing sales a year ago because the LLC was just formed last week. So we have training on those things also in other services because a lot of people might be in that situation. So I just want to add that. Perfect.
Let's take another person on a live chat call. I'm sorry, if it's possible. Ophir Frisch. Hey, Ophir. Ophir, can you hear us? Okay. Let's take Niv on the call. Hey, Niv.
How are you?
Hi, Niv. How are you?
Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you quite well.
Thank you very much for your webinar. Regarding to, I opened LLC in Delaware and I open an EIN number. My question is if EIN number is tax ID or I need to approach to IRS and open a tax ID, and when I need to pay the tax in the end of the year or on June, when do I need to do it?
So those are good questions, Niv. There's a couple points to it. So step number one is there's different terms that mean the same thing. So FEIN number, EIN number, tax ID number, they're all the same. So you already have an EIN number, you're fine. So sometimes I use different language. It means pretty much the same thing. Step two is in order to determine when your tax return is due, you have to figure out how your LLC is taxed. For example, if it's a single member LLC disregarded owned by you individually, that means you basically taxed like a sole proprietorship. And just as we mentioned with Michael, is the fact that it's a December 31st year end, and if you were selling last year, you would have a tax return due, and you want to get a hold of LDAT about that. Separately, you know, usually there's flexibility during your first year of sales that you don't have to do what's called quarterly estimated taxes. In other words, usually you got to wait for a whole year to go on. So most people go through the first year because you have inventory, you have costs, you have expenses. And what's really most important, especially when it comes to bookkeeping and accounting, is when you get to the end of the year to start pay attention to your numbers. In other words, is as you know, in November and December, your sales skyrocket because of Black Friday, holiday sales, the holiday season in the U.S. And so, but you really want to know your numbers because if you are a single member LLC disregarded owned by yourself individually, you know December 31st is your year end. So you really kind of want to know, are you breaking even? Are you profitable? If you do have a lot of profits in December, do you want to buy more inventory that could be more expenses? And that's where you want to really work closely with somebody like LDAT and get your bookkeeping up to speed, get your accounting so you can kind of better manage that. But that's a general overview, but you'll be in good shape when you contact him. He'll be able to take care of that for you.
Okay, but I want to emphasize, if I pay tax in Israel as LTD company, so how I advise the IRS that I already pay taxes in Israel?
I believe this is more like Eldad's field because Eldad is more familiar with the Israeli compliance, you know, when it comes to the U.S. and Israeli taxes. But Scott, you can expand more about what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I mean, in general, you know, you got to think through if it's your U.S. company had all the money and doing the business had expenses, that's one thing. If separately you had a separate Israeli company, that's a separate subject. Sometimes, as Eldad did on his webinar, the Israeli company does licensing fees. The U.S. company, there's expenses going back and forth. That's a whole different subject. And that's what Ori was saying, that Eldad would be the right person to kind of really help navigate that part.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome.
Okay, okay, let's take a couple more, and if it's okay, and okay, Shlomi, how are you today?
Hey, thank you for the great webinar.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Are you with me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you for the webinar. I want to know, I have a business in Israel, and I pay tax in Israel for Amazon. I'm a new seller on Amazon. I have a little profit and I pay taxes in Israel. I need also pay taxes in USA. I am a little bit confused. I don't want to open a bank account in USA. So there is something to do, or I must pay taxes also in USA?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I'll attempt to say it differently, and Ori, maybe you can help with the translation. Maybe that's the confusion. So there's a distinction between filing a U.S. tax return and paying U.S. taxes. So you will need to file a U.S. tax return to report to the U.S. how much money you made, and there's also what's called a treaty disclosure form, which will tell the IRS the reason you're not paying the taxes in the U.S. and you're paying them in your home country is because of the treaty disclosure. So you have to file tax forms in the U.S., but the end of the day, the taxes you're going to pay on profits would be back in Israel in general. Does that help simplify it?
I'll try to translate. Shlomi, would you like me to translate?
Yeah, go ahead, Ori, why don't you translate?
I understand the English. I don't understand the term. So if I want to say again, I pay taxes in Israel. I have not a company. I have business in Israel. I need to do something for the tax in USA. I need to do something, or my accountant. I give him all the finance data from Amazon to my accountant. It's enough.
So here's how I'll get specifically. You have an Israeli company, right?
It's not a company. It's yes.
Individually.
It's a business, but not a company.
Yeah, it's like it's not
individually.
Yes, it's a sole company. It's like a sole.
It's called authorized dealer in Israel. I don't know what is the right term in English.
No problem. So it's like a sole trader, or equivalent to a sole proprietorship in Israel. And so you're doing business in your name. You have a trade name, DBA name, something you're using. So basically, you're an individual seller, and you're filing and you're paying taxes in Israel is fine. But you're earning money in the U.S. Amazon is going to be sending you some type of K-1 representing how much money you earned in the U.S. And so, yes, you want to file a U.S. return representing those numbers of the tax treaty. LDAD has very specific experience with that. So, but at the end of the day, yes, you'll be paying your taxes in Israel, but you still have some paperwork and forms you need to fill out in the U.S.
Okay, thank you very much. It was great to talk with you, and great webinar.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
Ori, I want to add one more thing, not just for him, but for everybody. He said something I thought I heard him say, I don't need a U.S. bank account. So what that means is either you're using Amazon to send your money back to you, which is okay, but a lot of people don't realize Amazon charges 4%. That's on top of the merchant account fee of about 3%. If you use World First, which is a good resource, World First charges you about half the amount, about 2%. Now, if you have a U.S. bank account, then your money goes to U.S. bank account, then you're going to wire money whenever you need it. You might be paying $50 for a wire versus 2 or 4%. Now, it depends. If you're doing, $10,000 a month or $30,000 a month, the numbers can add up. So a lot of people don't realize the fees that Amazon's charging to send money back to you when you need it. So just something to look at in your Amazon account based upon your sales, because you may find it beneficial to have a U.S. bank account because it might be a lot less expensive to get money back to Israel.
That's right. Shlomi, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Ori.
Thank you. And guys, if you are serious in conducting business and saving fee, because eventually when you're doing big numbers on Amazon, creating a U.S. bank account is inevitable. You must do that, in order to eventually earn more. Okay, you don't want to use Payoneer or Word First or whatever. You want to do it, the right way. Have your own bank account, and don't limit yourself to a certain amount that Payoneer is limit you. Like, I don't know if it's $10,000 or stuff like this, because you will want to grow. And these platforms are not really allowing you to grow the right way, because eventually you'll need to pay your suppliers in China more than $10,000 which is not a very big amount when you want to order like, I don't know, 100,000 pieces. So just think about it. The right way to grow is eventually for creating a bank account, okay? Okay. One more.
So,
Scott,
Ori, I do want to put, we'll finish up here with the next question. The banking has changed over the years. There's been a period of time where we were not able to set up a U.S. bank account. What you said earlier, people had to fly to the U.S. So there's no guarantee that 6 months from now, because you got to keep in mind, they're already providing an exception for us. So part of the, you know, if you wait later, you may have to fly here anyway. So I would look at getting something established while it's still possible to do it without having to fly here. It's just, you got to keep that in mind.
right. Thank you, Scott, for letting us know this very important piece of information. I didn't knew it, but that's great. You know, I thought it's all about relationship, but you know, sometimes it's not. You know, you cannot do it because you just can't. So do it while you can.
I'll tell you this. We worked with a bank in the Southwest for 3 years, and we worked with the same branch manager, and I got a 1-week notice, and he said he was moving to a different bank altogether, and the new branch managers came in and said, we're not setting up these accounts anymore.
Wow, that sucks.
So that stuff happens.
I see. Okay, so, you know, use it while you can. This relationships can, you know, it's you know, worth something, and you can use it we can use it for our advantage. Now that we know Scott and we know that we can do it, you know, use it while you can. Scott, is it okay if I can get one more person on a call?
Yeah, let's do one more question, then we'll wrap her up here.
Okay, let's take Anat Litani.
Oh, hi.
Hi,
Can
Anat.
you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Oh, great. I have a couple of questions about the nature of the service you're providing on the more on the comprehensive, whatever you called it, because I didn't write it down. You mentioned, first of all, you mentioned some answering service. Is that a customer's, is that for the customers?
Yeah, so what that is, we set up, we have a very high-end phone system in our office. We set up a U.S. phone number that rings live to our office. We answer it during business hours. It'll get very little activity. Your customers are not going to call that number. What happens is sometimes when you fill out applications and you submit things to different platforms, they want to know what your phone number is. Most of the time, they'll take a international phone number, not a problem. But we've had Amazon call our office before. We've had PayPal. We've had Skype. So it's, and we charge very little for that service. A lot of times, honestly, we get wrong phone numbers. But so we do set up a real U.S. phone number as part of setting up a complete U.S. business structure. That is a part of it, yes.
Okay, let me ask you this. I have a business here in Israel, and I'm doing a lot of business through the phone because of the nature of my product, people have questions about it, and they like to call first. And well, we close many deals this way. And I'm apprehensive about. Okay, I have my stuff shipped to Amazon. It's there already, like a couple of weeks. I've been dealing there, and we've been advertising. And I haven't been advertising our phone number because people would be apprehensive about calling overseas. So does your, can I use your number and it would be redirected to me so I can get the calls or my staff or whatnot so we can assist people on the phone?
So it's a good question. It's a very specific one. I'll answer it quickly. More of those you could call our team because they could go through the nuances. But if you probably do not want us being your customer service because, A, we have a limit on how many calls we can take a month. It's not, you know, they have other call places in the U.S. or call centers that'll train them in, answer. We answer it in the name of the company. We can forward the line to you, but when it's forwarded, it's treated as a long-distance call and it's forwarded. So you probably would want to use a Google Voice number or something like that. So for the purpose you're deciding, you could have a U.S. number, but I wouldn't give that to your customers for what we do in that part. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And my second question is about accounting. Does it include the accounting fees, like tax, the tax return?
Like bookkeeping and things of that nature?
Yeah.
Yeah, bookkeeping, the price we talked about, the U.S. entity and the formation is any type of accounting or bookkeeping or tax returns, that's totally separate. Eldad does all of that, and he would quote, I will tell you, in sales tax system, I did a webinar with a e-commerce accountant who teaches other accountants, and he goes through the software tools between Xero, QuickBooks Online, the different tools to import inventory from Amazon into your QuickBooks or Xero account. So he's a tech guy, and he went through all the tools you need to simplify for it. So you might want to, if you were a member of sales tax system, you had access to that, you might want to listen to that, get the tools, and then you might want somebody like Eldad to review it on a quarterly basis or do the tax return. But yes, that, or if you're too busy, you want to just have somebody like Eldad or somebody just do your bookkeeping for you, that's totally separate.
Yeah, well, I'll have to look into, I'll consult my accountant here in Israel.
Sure.
How to do that. Okay, that was great.
I will tell you, that with Amazon and inventory, as you probably know, your inventory could some of your inventory could disappear and they credit your account. Then they find it a week later in a warehouse, the money goes back. So there are some things, if somebody's familiar with, because the volume that you could be selling could be tremendous, I just want to make sure you're not being overcharged so they don't do individual transactions. They pull them in batches. That's why we did the training, just to make sure, because it's most, I'll call it old school accountants would do transaction by transaction, and there's a proper way to import every couple weeks of sales and how to do that, and that's one of the trainings we did for our members in sales tax system. So just a thought for you as you kind of research who to use.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you very much for all of that. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
You all well. Thank you. Bye. Good night.
You're welcome.
Anat, thank you. Toda rabba. Thank you, Scott, for for giving us actually really enlightening us. Thank you for this, and I wish we can be with you here all night, and I think we have many more questions that people would like to ask you, but unfortunately we are 2.5 hours here on the call, and I'm sure Scott is exhausted.
Yeah, I feel I need to eat every 3 hours, but I'll be good. But I appreciate it. I think the key thing to know is that we pride ourselves in anticipating what your questions are going to be. We have so much step-by-step content that covers almost every situation. If we don't have it, we have a resource that we can get the answer to. And so I realize one of the challenges for folks is when they kind of take the next step, they're not sure of what all that's going to look like. And you just got to know that we have very good services. There are a couple other things I didn't cover for the sake of time as far as services, like if you're behind on sales tax. But the good news is we're very connected. We have great resources. We'd be more than happy to work with you. Again, we'll take first come, first serve as far as the U.S. entities for those who want to get in place. The key is the timing with the sales tax numbers. Again, if you get the U.S. entity, the bank account's included, which is a big bonus. You'll make sure it's done right. Yeah, you're going to find people that do it for $400 or $500. They don't have the resources, they don't have the tools, they don't have everything else. Then you're going to be parts and pieces. You're going to spend a lot more money to fix stuff you didn't do properly. So ideally, it's best to do it right. We'd love to help you do that. And so we're looking forward to helping those. Everybody who's selling on Amazon should be a member of sales tax system. The price will definitely go up in the future. It should be closer probably to $1,000, but It's a membership area. We have about 7 or 8 webinars in there with different sales tax firms, and we have spreadsheets. We have tools in there. So everybody definitely, you want to be a member of that, even if you're getting started, just to understand what's happening, because you're going to get up and rolling the next couple of months. Ori, I appreciate the opportunity to share with your audience. We've enjoyed working with your members. Currently up to date. We're looking forward to working with the new group, and you're doing an awesome job of bringing this, the right information to your group, which is key.
Thank you so much, Scott. I thank you so much for taking the time and really take the time to educate us all and explain to us what we need to do, and also offer us the done for you service. If we want to do it right, you are the right guy to do it. So thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And just keep in mind also is, I have a very good team. We do training every week. We do some training every day. We have meetings every day. The whole team is really up to speed on these subjects. So, they're the ones that are going to take you through the process, take good care of you, walk you through it. I'm kind of on the front end doing this type of training, and I'm a lot involved in the research and the different joint ventures, so you'll be in good hands when you work with us. So we appreciate the opportunity, and thank you once again.
Thank you, Scott, and have a good evening. I guess it's almost afternoon for you. So
yes, it's a little afternoon. That's okay. So it's early in the day, which is good news.
Yeah. Have a good day. Thank you so much, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Ori. Thank you, everybody. Have an outstanding evening. Look forward to work with you. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Scott. Bye, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Yeah,
bye.
Bye now.